Board meeting for Monday, August 8th, 2022 to order. We will note public access to meeting. We are currently open to access by the public. We also encourage, if there are members, whether it be COVID or some other reason that they are unable to attend personally, they know that they're able to attend via our website. We are live streaming. We will move into item 2, which, Carlene, could you do the roll call and verification of quorum, please?
Mr. Ebel.
Here.
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Portson. Here. Mr. Wade.
Here.
Ms. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Ms. Rano. Ms. Erler.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will move into item 4, public comments. We are continuing to accept public comments via email and also in person. Carlene, did we have any public comments via email?
We did not.
Okay. And has anybody signed up for public comments for tonight's agenda?
We have not had anyone sign up to speak.
Is there anyone here this evening who did not sign up but would like to speak on items on the board agenda? Seeing none, we will move into item 5, which are presentations. And the first presentation is Sarah O'Donnell, our communications director.
Hi, thank
Hi,
you.
Sarah.
At your places, I've put 2 very fun items. One is a copy of the strategic plan collateral. So that is just a representation of the good work that everyone did. Kind of updating and redoing that strategic plan reflects that work. If you are interested in or would like to have some of these brochures for your own use, let me know. I'm happy to provide those for you. We'll obviously be using them here around Bliss. We'll share them with realtors as well and a couple other places to kind of help spread that word. The other item at your place is our puzzle. So this will be our gift for staff when they come back each year. We used to do kind of that big kickoff at SPASH. We don't do that anymore. We found that we really want to give that time back to folks. So what we do in lieu is we'll do some kind of a grab and go breakfast and then provide them those puzzles on that theme. Our theme this year is You Are a Very Important Piece to Our Puzzle. So I feel like that all ties in very nicely. Beth's folks in HR are funding that with wellness dollars, and then we'll also use our kickoff video at the same time featuring Corey, Meg, and Dennis with some very uplifting messages of leadership. Back to school information is currently available on the district and school websites. Most schools are really ramping up communication or prepping for ramping up communication. Typically is in August is when we start to have parents really eager for that information. The easiest way to find the most general kind of before you get off is just pointschools.net/back to school. We'll get you right to kind of that main landing page, and from there you can dig in where you need to. July also, sorry, I'm jumping around. Dashboard. If we take a look at the dashboard, the reporting reflects just what we typically see, which is not a lot of engagement during July, which is okay. It calms down a little bit, gives us a chance to take a look at our annual communications plan, which is also included for your review. Should you have any questions, let me know. And then also is giving me an opportunity to work with HR and business services on a more in-depth recruitment campaign that officially kicked off August 1st. So we're excited to see kind of how that reflects and works. Questions for me?
So the work that you did with all the school supply lists, the feedback I'm receiving from parents is it's so helpful. So thank you. It's like so easy like to navigate, and it's a one-stop shop. So thank you. Regarding the communication dashboard, can you help me understand this the dollar amount, the $2 million? Is that the save? That's what we. How do we?
So that's an estimated advertisement like investment. So
Okay.
if you take our organic, it's what it would cost to purchase that. It is super high this month. It's an accurate count, but we had a lot of high-profile alumni getting attention during just kind of the month of July.
Okay.
So what happens then is you have big national outlets picking that up, so it throws that AVE through the roof.
Okay.
I would say it's a good estimate of like, are we receiving national attention? Are we receiving local attention? It's all organic.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Do any other board members have questions for Sarah? Sarah, I'm wondering if you could, because we're moving into the start of the school year, maybe just give a little description about our app?
I would love to do that in October when we
Okay.
re-release the app. So the district does have a mobile app. It's very general. I would say the best use for that app right now is calendaring. So if you are a parent who has kiddos in multiple locations, you can download the Point Schools mobile app, and then you can actually select calendars. So like for me, I could select Spash and Ben Franklin and have all of that calendar in one place that the schools do a really great job of updating. In October, when we kind of relaunch that app, we'll be able to get kind of further into, like you'll be able to see busing information, food service information, grade information, but we do not currently have that capability. So calendars, yes. General updates, yes. Beyond that, there's some other apps I would recommend.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good question.
Sarah, can I ask, so on the bus and the food, parents still are able to do that and get that information without the app?
Absolutely. So parents, I would encourage them to either use the Skyward app for that, or to go to their desktop and use Skyward Family Access. If anyone does not know how to do that or needs help doing that, call us. I'd be happy to walk you through or have someone walk you through how to see that. We do have a couple changes this year. Parents will notice most likely we changed our from student-based or from family-based accounts to student-based accounts. So when they go ahead and put in that like food service dollar amount, it'll be by kiddo instead of just by family. And food service is doing a great job communicating that, so that should be, they'll have
Thanks,
that
Sarah.
information.
Any other questions for Sarah? Thank you.
Thanks.
We will move into item B, which is the superintendent's report. Corey Hirschbrenner.
Sure. A few highlights to note. We've wrapped up summer school. It went well this year. We had a lot of students. We had about 2,450 students enrolled. They took 4,653 different courses. We had a lot of new courses this year. Camp Invention, band camp. So we continue to add new courses each year. So that went well. We are gearing up. We're in high gear for the start of the school year. The 11-month employees are back. 12-month employees, of course, have been here, and everyone else will soon be arriving. So our buildings are looking great. The custodial staff has, again, done a phenomenal job making our buildings look great. New staff will be joining us August 17th through the 23rd. Board members are invited to attend on Monday, the 22nd, and that's at 8 o'clock at Spash. That's when board members get introduced to all of our new staff.
Is that in the library?
It's in the library. Yep. All other staff return on August 25th, and then our 4K kindergarten, 7th and 10th graders start September 1, and all other students come back September 6th. Staffing, we've got about 10 open positions currently. Many of those are in process of finding someone to fill those positions. So we're feeling pretty good today about where we're at. But I will tell you, it's kind of been up and down throughout the summer. But right now, we're feeling really good about it.
Is that total or just faculty?
That's teachers. Just
teachers,
faculty.
okay.
Yep. As far as EAs go, special ed EAs is where we're finding it most difficult to fill those positions. Bus drivers, we have 3 new drivers that were hired, and they're in training, so that's a good thing also. Leadership spent an entire day last week. There was about 60 individuals, so we had our entire leadership team. We had the Plover Police Department, Stevens Point Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, Portage County Business Council, and then all of our private schools, we did an emergency safety training specifically related to what our standard response protocol is in the event that we have an emergency, and then if we have to reunify to a different location for families to get their kids. So it was great. It was conducted by the I Love You Guys Foundation. We had 2 individuals come from Colorado, and then we've also got some staff trained here in the district that will continue to train our staff and our families throughout the year. So that went really well. And then lastly, a couple things from WASB. If the board is interested in possibly adopting a resolution to pass on to WASB for their policies to consider, the work that they do each year, please let Carlyn know if you have anything that you're interested in by August 26th. And then if we have items, we'll bring those back for the September meeting, and they have to be to WASB by the 15th. The other WASB item is, all of you should have received in the mail information about the Region 5 representative for the board. If you are interested in being nominated for that, also let Carlyn know by the 26th. Then the board can take action on that and pass one name on to the Region 5. Other than that, that's all I've got.
So, and for new board members, the resolutions are the resolutions that we as board members attending the state convention in January will be reviewing. And all districts have the ability to submit a resolution that they feel would be helpful. What those resolutions do is they actually form the direction for the WASB in terms of reaching out to our legislators about changes that we may want to see at the state level. So I don't know that our board has submitted one in quite some time, but if board members have some thoughts about something in particular that really is more of a state legislative focus that we would like to ask the WASB to pay attention to in that whole lobbying effort, that's what that's about. And then that representative is a District 5 representative. There's one representative for each region, and they meet throughout the year to talk about, again, that direction for WASB moving forward. So we haven't had a representative from Stevens Point, I don't believe, for quite some time. Chris, you probably would know.
I'm not
more.
sure if Mary Thurmeyer
Mary
did.
Thurmeyer may have been.
Back when?
Yep. But if
Was back
anybody's
when.
interested, then again, we as a board are required to take formal action on that and provide that as a submittal at our September board meeting. We would do that. And thank you, G, for bringing that forward.
Is there any ideas you could give us on the time commitment on something like that? How often do they meet, responsibilities?
So I will tell you, I served on the resolution committee, and it was about a quarterly. And I'm thinking that's typically what they do with their committees. It's about a quarterly commitment. It, back then, prior to COVID, required travel. The meetings were held in the Madison area. I think they probably have some options in terms of remote. But it's a really interesting experience. You get to see something from that, more, statewide level in terms of forming direction for schools throughout the state. Does anybody else have any questions of Corey about anything on the superintendent's report? All right, we will move forward to the consent agenda. Items on consent agenda are the minutes of our prior school board meeting for July 11th, 2022, approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and employment recommendations. So I am looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Wade and second by Robbie. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, I will ask Carlyn to call the roll due to the monthly bills.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson, Yes. Ms. Bushman?
Yes.
Mr. Robbie?
Yep.
Ms. Erler?
Yes.
And motion carries.
Thank you. So we will move forward for segment item 7, Human Resources, and section 8, Business Services, and I will turn that over to Mike Wade as the chair of that committee.
Okay, well, we met this last Monday and talked about a number of business service items which were on the agenda, but we also had a human resource agenda item which was about personal leave. And in short, district staff are granted personal leave amount each year. And for most employees, it's kind of difficult to use that. If they don't use it, they lose it. And so there's a tendency to wait till the end of the school year to use that personal leave, which causes concern in the last portion of the year for that many teachers to be out on personal leave, and you have to find teachers, substitute teachers that can come in. So Beth has an idea of sort of a pilot project for the upcoming school year that unused leave can either be carried over or paid to employees. And the committee felt like that was a good idea and should come before the board, so.
Yeah.
Any
Thanks,
thing to add to
Mike.
that?
Sure. We would like to make a little bit of a revision on the recommendation that we're bringing to the board this evening, and that is to provide up to 3 days of either a payout or a rollover into the sick leave balance. And that way it's consistent across, the 10, 11th, and 12-month employees. So, but you did a nice job explaining what we're looking for. The challenge at the end of the year, just to give you an idea, we had over 300 personal leave requests from teachers and over 300 for non-certified staff. So it's pretty hectic to try to scramble and fill those positions with substitutes because they have to have a sub, and also provide a 1-week minimum notice to be approved for the personal leave. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Oh, the question, I just want to thank the HR department and the rest of the administrative team for bringing this forth. I think it meets the needs of the administration and our building leadership regarding having teachers in the classroom at the end of the school year. It also meets the concerns that have been expressed by our staff for several years regarding those days. And so I think it's a win-win situation, and I'm very, very supportive of it. And I'm hoping the year and years to come that we can always keep our minds open to finding situations in which we can meld the needs of the district to the concerns of our staff and have win-win situations like this. I think it's a great idea. So thank you.
You mentioned that they could roll their personal days into their sick days,
Into their sick leave balance.
so that could accumulate over the years.
Yes, there is a maximum accrual for that.
Then you also mentioned there could be a money payout on those.
Yes. So for certified staff, it would be $130 a day, and then for non-certified staff, it would be $13.50 an hour.
Thank you.
That's the cost of a sub.
Do board members have any further questions of that?
Well, I will move to approve the personal leave pilot program.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mike and a second by Jen. Any discussion or questions on that motion?
Just a comment, at the end of the year, then you'll give us feedback in terms of how it has been effective or not effective
Yep.
in terms of reducing some of those needs in the building.
And at that point, any costs that the district incurred.
So when you talk about the 300 and 300, are you talking about specifically for the month of May?
From April 28th through the end of school, which was June 5th.
Are there any other pressure points during the year that we see?
Not that I'm aware of. I think, people tend to save them throughout the year just in case they have maybe some sort of family emergency that they need that time for, and then it's, oh, wow, if I don't use these, I'm going to use or lose them. So I think that's where the big hiccup is.
And in terms of financial impact to the district, I guess could you speak to, again, the reality we have somebody off, then we're looking for a sub, and we are looking to pay a sub
Correct.
if we can find a sub, basically.
If we can find a sub.
So in terms of the financial impact to the district at this point,
We hope that it won't be, it will be minimal. I would say there are 41 of our employees who have capped out at their sick leave balance. So if those individuals chose not to use their personal days throughout the year, and we had to pay out up to the 3 days, you're looking at about 13,000. But again, if they were gone, we would hopefully have a sub for that and have to pay the sub cost.
okay.
Just clarification, of those staff members who've maxed out, typically, do they burn, I thought that the total number of burn days for the entire staff is pretty low, like it was 80 or something like for the entire staff. Is that accurate then?
Well, they have 80 hours of sick leave to use in a year.
Right.
So if they're maxed out, ideally, depending on when they were grandfathered, when they changed the sick leave accrual program, they would just lose those days if they were already maxed out.
Okay. But it's possible, though, that we could actually make money on this, given the fact that our sub pay is not, our complete cost of a sub for any given day.
There is a
So
markup
that
rate.
will help balance that off somewhat, I would assume.
Yes.
Thank you.
Beth, I just wanted to say thank you for putting this forward, but also for making it a pilot program, because I know there are a number of times during the year that something's changed, and it is a pilot to make sure this is really successful in that. So appreciate that it's not going to be, if we find out it isn't working either for employees or the district, we're going to relook at it again. So thank you.
Any further questions from board members? All right, I believe I have a motion on the floor. And so all of those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed with nay? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Okay, the next item under business services, 8B, this is the Gerke Park area usage and financial agreement. And this is quite lengthy, and Dr. Owens will do a great job of explaining it, so I'll turn it over to you, Doctor.
Okay. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Kind of dark in here.
Yeah,
It is.
saving money for the district.
Well, I hope to enlighten you a little bit with this. I'm sorry, I couldn't pass that out. With this discussion, the Gerke Park area usage and financial agreement. We've been working with the city and a number of people in the community. Have been working very hard to put together this agreement in a very cooperative manner. It's got a lot of very excellent parts to it, which I've covered in the committee, et cetera. It's a 10-year agreement, technically a 15 if you add the first 5-year extension onto it, because as you see in the agreement, there's a linkage with the capital payments on the next 5 years of the agreement, the 10 years plus the 5. But it is a 10-year agreement in the base start of it. And we have been, of course, paying for various aspects of the field use at Gerke Park and some of the fees, et cetera. On average, over the years, we've spending about $41,500 on those fees, et cetera. Through this arrangement, et cetera, it's a little bit higher. It's at $56,000, but it also does a great thing here. It ties together a lot of loose ends that were out there before. We didn't have clarity on the use of some of the tennis courts with respect to PJ and the Phi Ed department, as well as some of the softball fields, et cetera. So now they're covered under the agreement for that additional part. Another fine point about this is this agreement lists us as third in priority with the activities that go on when we schedule things. We're still third in the football, although, of course, we share that in alternating years with Pacelli in terms of scheduling, but we're still third. There's just a number of things I can go through. On our operational payment schedule, you see we start out at $56,000. Looking at the Parks and Recs operational budget plus the budget for Willett, they run about 1.8 million, a little over that. So our operational portion of that is around 3%. So it's not a tremendous portion of that. So that's handy, a little bit of information to know. With respect to the operational budget, the capital budget, they're looking at approximately for both phases, $5.6 million of improvements in that area. You know, it involves Willett Center, it involves some of the surrounding areas as well as the stadium. And that investment that we're making of it, we're making towards it over the 15 years is $337,500, which represents 6% of that total. So again, we're not dipping into a very large portion of commitment here, but we are committing to it, and I think it's important, everything that goes on. You've received the background information of all of the projects that they're looking at, along with the donors, et cetera. And you can see there's already been a significant amount of community support for this, as well as large donations made by people, and of course they're continuing to look for additional donations as well. Another interesting part of this, it's a small part, but I think it's a very interesting and important one to mention. There is a reciprocity agreement that the UWSP has granted the city and all of their designees involving us as well, that we have free reciprocity use of all turf athletic fields at the UWSP for the life of this agreement. So that provides us some additional latitude for some scheduling if that should need be. The contract was pretty forward. As I said, I've worked with the city. They were very cooperative and helpful, the Parks Department there. We took all of the various pieces of contracts, old contracts, et cetera, and I put it together and created this document. And it went to their city attorney, and they went through it, et cetera, and we feel pretty comfortable with it. I think it gives us a good status going forward for all the parties involved. The city, the school district, the UWSP, the Crystal Ice skating groups, all of the various Boys and Girls Clubs on different groups that will wind up using these facilities. It'll coordinate it, organize it, and I think help finance it over the longer course strategically. So, subject to your questions.
Chris?
Tom, the improvements,
Yes.
when do they start, or are they once this is approved? And I read through some of the improvements.
What are some of the improvements?
No, when would they be implemented?
Well, my conversations with the city indicated that after the board takes its action, they've already begun passing them through their committees. They'll take it to the city, and once we get the go-ahead, then they'll be out for bids, and they'll want to start right away. They and I'm sure the other parties that are part of this agreement would like to have had it done yesterday and last month, but
Right.
these things unfortunately take a little bit of time, but as soon as we can get the go-ahead with the city and us, I think the city is the last cog after us, then they can start bidding it and getting going on the projects. That's my understanding.
And some of them have actually already started because they needed to be done.
Right.
Yep.
I have a question, Tom, just for my own explanation. Items, the operational payments and then the capital payments, they're different. What's the difference between them?
Well, the operational covers the the ongoing costs of operating the facilities, paying people, the grounds, seed, trucks, all the stuff, et cetera, that we contribute towards that. The capital is what the payments that are going towards principal and interest for the retirement of the debt for the project. As I'd mentioned, the project is estimated about $5.6 million for both phases. And this would be our share of that responsibility that be paid into the city. We'll make those two payments once a year because of the conflict between the fiscal year versus the calendar year. I worked it out with them that we just make one payment a year, and that simplifies it for both of us in terms of the
Our
organization.
total for 2022 will be
The
the
total-
56 plus the 22.5?
Yes.
Okay.
It'd be 22.5 plus the 56,000.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And there's a 2.5% escalator for cost of living throughout the contract.
So Tom, you note in your memo that, we're kind of, I don't want to say, this is just where we're at. I mean, as you note, failure to participate in the agreement would leave the district in the last priority position. With the need to pay for site improvements planned by the city, excuse me, rentals and fee rates are expected to double. The result would be that the district would likely pay as much or more for site use, assuming our ability to accomplish scheduling, as
Sure.
we would be last in priority. So
Yeah.
we're kind of in a situation where we do this and we remain third in priority and we pay the increase, which again is proportionately shared by the various partners, or we choose not to, and then we're last in priority and we wind up having to pay as much or more
Sure.
without the priority of scheduling.
Right.
Okay.
But- And I put that in there for clarification. It's
Correct.
certainly not meant as a threat. It's more of just
Reality.
the reality situation.
Yep.
All of the partners in here are committing themselves to something, and they're getting the priority of usage.
Mm-hmm.
So if a group says that they don't want to participate, then obviously they move to the back of the line. I mean, that's just common sense.
Yes.
And obviously with the improvement that's going on and the investments that are going to be put into it by the city and by us if we join this and the UWSB, the rates that exist now would not support those further investments. So those rates are going to go up. And I would be very confident in saying that the rates will probably be much higher, and we would wind up probably paying more than we're paying now and get worse service. And we wouldn't want to do that. I mean, besides being a partner in this effort, I think is worthwhile to the school board and the district and all the families and children of the district. I think we all would benefit as a group.
Who's in first and second priority? I'm just curious. We're
Say again?
third. We're third in priority. Who's first and second?
Our priority would be third, the city's first, then UWSP, and then us. And when we say priorities, we're just talking about who gets the first shot at scheduling this or
Okay.
scheduling that. I mean, they've been very good over the years. We've had little difficulties, so.
Okay.
Tom, you may not have this information yet, but do you know if there's anybody who was offered participation as a
The what?
member in this?
Could you speak into the?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you know if there's anybody who was offered participation in this who has declined participation? Are you aware of anybody at
I'm
this
not
point?
aware of anyone who's declined participating in this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do board members have any further questions of Tom? Okay, so we will be looking for a motion to approve the Gerke Park area usage and financial agreement with the city of Stevens Point as presented.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Chris and a second by Jen. Any discussion or questions on the motion? I guess I just want to note, I'm grateful for the residents of the community that stepped forward once again. This happened a number of years back, and members of our community took the initiative to really push forward the improvements needed. They've done so again. It's been a very comprehensive and, as Tom said, coordinated communication. We've been hearing about this for a number of months. None of us are surprised. And again, I appreciate all the efforts of everyone and all the private donations also that are going to help support this effort. So with that, I will ask for those in favor with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries.
The next item under business services is C, revision of 2021-2022 budget. I believe every year at this time, we look back at the prior year's budget and any of those things that were estimated that we have better numbers for. We revised the budget one last time. Is that correct, Mike?
Yep, that's correct. So if you think back, we passed the original 2021 budget, 2021-22 budget. The board adopted it back in October. So any changes then that happened since then must be approved by a 2/3 majority of the school board and then published in the paper within 15 days of approval. The majority of the revisions that we had over the course of the year are due to grants and federal projects. So at the time of budget adoption, we have to estimate some of our grant variables. And then these estimates are finalized over the course of the year. So if you're able to look at that attachment, you'll see that the changes that we had really didn't have a significant impact on the budget that we passed. So for example, there's a change column on the adopted budget. And if you're able to see that third column, the ending fund balance, the change in ending fund balance remained at 0. So what that means is really the budget didn't change much at all, in that it kind of zeroed out. So what I mean by that is we had some additional revenues that we had to put into the budget, but they were offset by additional expenses of the same amount. So in the general fund, we had $541,000 of additional expense, but we also had $541,000 of additional revenue. So they zero out. In Fund 27, we had about $1,500 in additional revenue and $1,500 in additional expense. So in the end, there was no change to our projected ending fund balance. Any questions on that?
Do board members have any questions with respect to that? Are these the additional funds that we had, are we talking about the funds that are the kind of the one-time COVID-related funding, or funding through the state that we received this past year that we were not aware of when the budget was first passed?
Both of those are correct. So we've had some additional funds in, let's see, I just jotted down a few of them. Reading Readiness Grant changed a little bit. We had some Title I changes. We had changes then also with ESSER, which is the COVID money. And then we had that Get Ahead grant. It was $104,000 that we just received toward the end of the year that is actually going to get spent next year. But that was another one that got added in there. So,
Do board members have any other questions?
I will move to approve the revised 2021-22 budget.
Second.
All right, that's a motion by Mike and a second by Dennis. Any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. Thanks, Mike.
thanks.
And the last item under business services is a review of 2021-22 general fund budget performance. This is for informational purposes only. Tom, are you going to?
You want me to? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I picked the wrong one. Oh. Try a different way, Tom. Hold on. There we go.
Okay, this is a look at the general fund's budget performance for this past school year. On the next slide, we'll take a look. We'll be parsing this out, but on a large scale, the revenue variance was about 2.2 million for the general fund this year. That's a change of about 2.5%. And I'll get into the reasons for that in the next couple of slides. Expenditure, the variance was just a little over $1 million, which is about 1.1%. And in the next slide, we'll get into the actual revenue itself. So as you can see on the right, higher interest income offsets lower revenues that came in from mobile home fees. Although we did receive some mobile home fees in the mail just the other day, interest that came in. So these numbers are very close to being the final ones, but we have to complete the audit, and there is a possibility of some small amounts coming in, et cetera. So these are not the absolute, these are not the audited numbers. So they're subject to a little bit of change yet. Categorical aids and high-cost transportation aid did come in higher than expected. You see categorical aids at about $57,000. That was additional money that the legislature did do for some of the special education areas and some of the other categorical aspects. High-cost transportation aid is something that's very difficult to project, as it's based on an average of what all other, it's 140% of the average state expenditures for transportation, so it can change. One year you can get nothing, and the next year you can get a larger amount, or it varies quite a bit. So we were a little pleasantly surprised when we saw that much come in. The other state aids, et cetera, as expected, federal aids, et cetera, were less than, were down. Some of that had to do with some of the projects that were not spent as heavily, but some of the state aids came down a little bit. The largest increase that we got, 1.3 million, was through the federal government, but through the state. It was federal aid, but it does not come through DPI. That had to do with the $1 million the governor took from the feds that he got for the COVID side money that they let the governors spend however they wanted to do. So he came up here and gave us some money, which was appreciated. And then also we had some other money come in through school-based services, Medicaid, et cetera, from prior years. That was a little more than expected that we got as that came through. So we had a little higher insurance premium rebates that came in as well. And under other aidable, that had to do with E-rate and with focus on energy. So we brought in some, a large amount of that. The largest share, of course, was E-rate, et cetera. So that was kind of expected to be coming in after we found out some of the expenditures that would qualify for that. On the next slide, we're looking at expenditures. Salaries and benefits kind of balance each other out. And the other accounts like personal services, utilities, travel, supplies, material, et cetera, those all came in under what was expected. Some of the reasons for that involved copy costs, different accounting arrangement that we did, which increased in some of the revenue, but it increased in expense because it wasn't a clearing account arrangement anymore. Travel, $169,000. A good share of that had to do with contracted transportation, because we frankly had so much difficulty with that and filling a lot of the positions and getting some of that taken care of. It wound up coming up short on some of the expenditures as well. On the $400,000 there, open enrollment, we had a number left over there for that. We had some monies left over in supplies. The buildings do a great job of trying to hold back and not spend money if they can hold off to it. Some of the other ones, apparel and non-capital, not that much. Resale and textbook and technology, the largest chunk technology there was a little over budget. And then we did have some textbooks purchased. I think that was about $200,000 on that. Capital objects, other accounts. The one that really made a difference too overall on the expenditure side was the transfer to Fund 27. Just take a moment to explain. The 27 fund, and you're going to see a slide on this next, but the 27 fund means the special education fund. And all of the federal projects that have to do with special education are recorded in that. All the salaries and benefits for special education activity is recorded in that fund. And when you take all of the expenses and all of the federal monies that come in for that, it's not enough. You wind up with a shortfall. And the requirement is that that must balance to zero. And that requires the school district to have a local share of its responsibility towards special education. And that local share is this transfer amount, where you transfer money from the 10 fund to the 27 fund at the end of the year to balance it. That's the local cost of special education in this district. So if you ever wanted to find out what the special ed cost was for any district in the state of Wisconsin, you only have to look at the amount of money the general fund transfers to the special ed fund. And that's the local share or the local support that is being provided towards special education. Well, for a variety of reasons, it came in a little bit higher, lower than we expected, which helps because then it provided some additional funding, allow us for the 46 fund that you see there. But let me go to the next slide and just briefly talk about the 27. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. You indicate that the resale textbook and technology area was a little overspent. It was about $500,000. Do you know what attributed to that overspending?
I don't know all of the exact details of the technology. If I had Brian here, maybe he could explain that, but I have not yet looked into the details behind
Okay.
all of that.
And do you know if it was technology or textbooks or resale or what portion of that area? Or
The
is it mostly
largest
technology?
portion was technology.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you let us know at a future date or just email just what attributed to that overcost?
What contributed to that?
Right. Why was it over budgeted?
As I said, I haven't looked into that yet.
Right. When you do that, I'm asking.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
You're welcome. Okay, on the next slide, you can see this is the 27 fund, and of course, it has to balance out at zero, the budget as well as the actual. And that varied a little bit. We had 419,000 more in revenue with categorical aid that was provided by the legislature, and 87,000 more came in general aid, but that was the limit of that expanse there. Federal aid came in under budget by 312,000, which contributed to that increase. And with one exception in the expenditure side, every major object performed under budget. And of course, that resulted in a total of about $1 million less there. So our transfer was 1.2 million less than we'd originally budgeted. Some of that is due to some efficiencies and some underspending in projects. Could also be, some of it, I'm sure, was just plain budgeted high, and we screwed up on that. So I have to say that. So if we take a look at the next slide, we wound up with a $483,641 balance. In all, when you look at everything that took place, we were 96.4% accurate in our projection. Those are big numbers taken by themselves. When they come out of a budget around of 100 million, it constitutes an accuracy rate of 96.4%. Having the 483,000 was good because, as I noted here at the bottom, that it did provide cover for the setup of the reserve that the board directed me to do with respect to the elementary playground grant program. So that put that in a nice arrangement and set that up so it was pretty much an even trade. So we worked out. And again, the budgets swing and sway. I know you've heard me say this before. And I had a quote, unfortunately, that was repeated in the Wonky Journal from the Green Bay Press Gazette, where we talked about budgeting in these times is kind of like being blindfolded, turned around in circles and throwing a dart at a dartboard, to try to hit something. Not the greatest quote in the world, but kind of a little, kind of a little accurate, that sometimes it's kind of hard. It's hard to be right all the time. It's hard to be 100% accurate, but we're trying. And I also mentioned in the committee meeting that our preliminary budget was not reliable. I said that at the time of the committee meeting. I don't expect us to be that bad when we get the final numbers, but we'll see what we get, because it could swing. We thought we'd be 2.7 in the hole. We wound up basically pretty much close to breaking even, but we had some money left over, so that was good. In the end, it turned out well. Hard to predict these things. Questions? Yes, sir?
Just a comment, in any budget cycle, we have good news and bad news, and this year, we apparently had more good news and bad news, so that's fortuitous. But I also want to say that I want to thank you and the administrative team. The fact that we added to the fund balance this year and last year, it just reflects good stewardship of taxpayers' dollars, so I really appreciate the work that you put in and the administrative team at all levels put into this. Thank you.
You're welcome, and I'd like to share that comment from you towards all the principals, because they do a great job in managing those funds and being responsible with those dollars that they have and attempting to carry over as much as they can. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just a question. Can you give us a feeling for the things that happened in our favor this past year to make the budget come out so nicely? Are they one-time things, or are they things that can occur from year to year?
Some of them were one-time things, definitely. The governor handing us $1 million, you know. When does that happen? I've been at this for, 51 years, and that's the first time I've seen that happen. And he wouldn't have done that if the feds hadn't given him the money. Well, not that he wouldn't have, he couldn't have, he didn't have the money. But so that's a one-time thing. Some of the school-based accounting, school-based services, the rebates that we got, those have been returned to us now. So whether or not they'll be that large in the future is not known. E-rate reimbursements, I don't know how those will continue, if they'll continue, or in what amounts. The refunds on, or the money that we get from high-cost transportation aid, that varies every year, so that's kind of hard to call. I'll have some interesting data to show you when we get into October about the amount of money that we used to get with respect to per pupil, revenue limit per pupil allocation used to be indexed to inflation. And back in about 2008, they turned that off, and they've been giving us, in some years, in this biennial, nothing to increase our revenue limits. And I think you'll be surprised by some of the numbers of the effect that that's had on us, but I'm not prepared yet to share that with you, but I will be in October. So there just are a number of things that come up and happen. And there'll be things that we don't even think of now that'll happen next year. I mean, who would have thought of COVID, for example,
Yeah.
you know, this type of thing. So it's a good question.
Tom, I just wanted to say thank you very much. You give a great explanation for each of the revenue and expenditures, and some of them, and especially the community, being lay people in a school budget and hearing these things, you give a really clear explanation. It's very, very much appreciated.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And it's hard sometimes to be accurate, but, you know, if you had a $50,000 a year budget with respect to looking at just the expenditure side of our performance on the budget, budgeting a year out, we'd be within $550 on a $50,000 budget. So
Right. Thanks,
again, they're
Tom.
big numbers, but it's a proportional thing.
I guess I'm just going to tie what Dennis said and the question that G asked you as well into the reality that that our staff continues to actively manage the budget throughout the year. It's much easier for, I'm not saying it's totally easy, but it's much easier to budget post-October when we know that we've got a per pupil increase coming in moving forward throughout the year. This year, at least in the time I've been on the board, was an aberration, that the dollars didn't come in per pupil ongoing. They came in one-time lump sum to cover the shortages that we as a board predicted that we were going to have. So I'm grateful that we were able to receive those one-time funding. But it remains that we as a district need to remain vigilant because we are looking at a 0% increase next year if nothing changes at the state level. And that will be 2 years in a row of a 0% increase with no anticipation of one-time funding coming in to help cover the reality of the deficit that's going to create. So, anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome, thank you.
All right, so we will move into the next part of our agenda, which is educational services, and I will turn that over to G. Pope, who is our chair on that committee.
Thank you. We started off with a resolution that was passed at the committee level to recommend to the school board we have to do a required adoption of academic standards for the year at this August school board meeting. And Chris can explain a little bit more about that if you'd like to.
Sure, just fairly standard operating procedure, I guess, right?
Not Chris,
Which
okay.
Chris, you Chris.
I'm really liking this, Chris and Jeff, because I hear the name and jump. Am I supposed to be doing something? Wake up, wake up.
Not right now. So, right, it's fairly standard operating procedure for those of you that have been on the board for a while, required to approve the academic standards at the first board meeting after July 1st. And I did share at committee that following the approval of these academic standards, we do have a more family-friendly version of each of the standards that we'll make available under Ed Services on our on our district website. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions if there are. Mike?
You know, I've never taken the time to look into the standards, but I did before this meeting, and so I drilled into one of the standards to look at mathematics standards, because I thought I may understand that. I didn't once I got there, but how do you, it seems extremely detailed, and it would be, and kind of unwieldy for a district our size, all the different grade levels, to conform to the various standards. Do we just make sure that our textbooks and our material conform to the standard we want? Is there an education process for teachers to be able, to be sure to teach to a certain standard? How does this work?
So all of the above, right? So of course, the first step in standards alignment is to select resources that are standards aligned, which in most cases we have. As standards are revised in certain instances, we need to develop a cycle that is an alignment for resource vetting and adoption. So Jeff and I are currently in the process of developing a more comprehensive plan to look at how we do vet and select curricular resources when those revisions are made. And it typically happens in a 6-year cycle. The first step in that 6-year cycle then is to unpack those standards. That work typically happens at the building level with building leadership and our instructional leaders, our academic interventionists. Once that's done, teachers do the important yet difficult and time-consuming work of identifying what we would call priority standards and aligning that to classroom instruction, which then trickles down even further to what we're doing for individual or small groups of students. So it is a multi-layered process, but it does begin, as you alluded to, Mike, with selection of standards-aligned resources first and foremost.
And are there lots of other standards out there for districts to pick from, or is there kind of a limited number that are sort of the accepted ones that are available to?
So these are the standards that are approved by the Department of Public Instruction for the state of Wisconsin. So the option, if we were to not adopt these standards, would be to create our own. So those are kind of the two options that exist. The latter is obviously incredibly time-consuming. Yeah. What I just described is time-consuming enough. But to go out and kind of do our own, there certainly are districts across the country that do that. But most districts in the state of Wisconsin adopt the standards that are approved by the DPI.
Mike, as a former teacher in the district, and I think this happens in every district, we would, as you said, every 6 years or so, we knew the standards in our particular subject, and we would align our curriculum to make sure that we're accomplishing those standards, and we would have to show that in various lessons throughout the year. And that is, as you said, that's a lot of work.
Dennis?
One thing that does make it a little bit less unwieldy is when you go for an adoption, generally speaking, the companies will come in and they will have all the alignments for the resources to show you how and where they align, and also they'll even give you strategies and support material to support that alignment. So it becomes a little less hectic because, and I think there's probably some compatibility between standards in Wisconsin, standards in it's pretty.
Absolutely.
They always say that Texas was the district or the state that kind of guided, and all the textbooks, developed around Texas standards, but I don't know if that's true. It might just be more Texas bragging, so.
Right. Well, and certainly when we go through the process of identifying curricular resources that we would begin even the vetting process with, we're very intentional about ensuring that those are standards aligned for our state. It just makes the process a little less daunting.
And I can add that in that process, invariably, we would find that we're way ahead of the standards. We were already doing all that and more. So in that respect, it was fairly easy.
Are there any further questions of Chris with respect to the student academic standards for 2022-2023? Hearing none, I would look for a motion to approve the recommended academic standards for the 2022-2023 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dennis and second by Jen. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries.
And then we had a couple other things that were not to be voted on, but for information only. Chris and Jeff presented a plan to appoint a professional development steering committee that they're working on, and we had some suggestions, who should be on the committee and things like that. And Chris and Jeff want to, instead of a 1-year plan, to extend it into a 2 or 3 year plan, so we get some continuity. And then, per our suggestions, you're going to come back again with another list or another suggestion for the professional development committee. We also had a discussion about what to do with e-learning days. There's been a problem. Some people have complained that they're not conducive to good education because people don't have access, or some teachers weren't putting out schoolwork for them to do during the professional development days. And they were going to look into that and see what other school districts in the area are doing with e-learning days. And then the last one was a report about a nonprofit group that does works with our students to do oral hygiene, free to our students, which is really nice. They estimated they do about $9,000 worth of work in the district, and they do this for, what did you say, 50-some schools or something in the state?
Yes.
And we're one of those. I'm sure we're grateful to have that. So that was
Bridging
it.
Brighter Smiles is the nonprofit.
Oh, what is it?
Bridging Brighter Smiles
Okay,
is
yeah.
the nonprofit.
Okay.
Do board members have any questions of G or comments with respect
I don't
to
know
the
if
meeting?
G has the answer to this, and Corey, I'm not sure. Do we have any idea when that advisory committee,
A steering committee.
the steering committee was implemented?
Which steering committee?
The
The professional
PDC.
development?
Yes.
It's going to be, they're in the process of pulling that together.
Right, but there was an original,
For
was there
professional
not?
development, no.
No?
Not since I've been here.
Okay.
So, Chris, we met with an initial group of individuals, primarily
Right.
composed of BLIS administrators. in it was about in mid-July, I guess. And we have our next scheduled meeting on September 14th for that team to layer in administrators next and then bring forth recommendations to include teachers as part of that conversation. One of the results of the committee discussion was to have larger or broader representation of teaching staff so that they have a voice at the table in terms of identifying those big rocks moving forward. So that is certainly something that we'll take back
Okay,
and be sure
thanks.
to address. You're welcome.
And then in regards to e-learning, I think the concern was just ensuring that we have a way to measure success of e-learning. To your point about equity, like the most vulnerable populations, that they are actually someone's checking to ensure that that learning is happening, so we can ensure that there's no more learning loss than already, and upskilling teachers because e-learning is not going anywhere. So if we say e-learning is going to be counted as an instructional day, right, on PD days, on snow days, let's upskill the teachers so they feel confident building lessons on those days that we count as instructional days.
That was the rub. They're counted as instructional days now. Are they really? They want to make it align with what we're really counting them as. And Chris and Jeff said they're going to see what other schools in the area are doing with that.
Well, I think coming during COVID and then coming out of
Yes.
COVID, there was a recognition that we had a number of students that needed days to catch up.
Correct.
Students who were behind. And so that focus on e-learning was really that focus on let's provide for catch-up. And now as we move forward, and as maybe we're leveling off a little bit more, and then we're looking at, all right, what is our purpose moving forward with those e-learning days, taking into account that there are students who are going to continue to need that catch-up time, and there are other students who are going to need that more enrichment during those times that they're at home. So administration, you're going to be taking a look at that and coming up with some ideas.
I think part of the concern too is the look of it is if your faculty is doing professional development that day, but your students are also doing school that day, are we splitting people in half so they can do both
Right,
at the
that-
same time?
Right.
And how do you handle that? Some teachers, wouldn't do anything, which we are not happy about, but then other teachers would be doing double duty in one day and be working till 10 o'clock that night, looking at the schoolwork that they put out there. So, it's a problem, it's something that,
Yeah, and I think
They're gonna
coming
look
off
at.
of the last 2 years of COVID, it just affords a really unique opportunity to kind of recalibrate around purpose and I guess how we proceed moving forward in terms of tightening up expectations or guidelines. So, yeah, the committee had a lot of really good feedback and we appreciate it.
Okay.
and that was it.
All right, thank you, G. So we will move into item 10, student services, and that is our annual resolution regarding expulsions and independent hearing officers, and I will turn that over to Corey.
Yep, and I've got Caleb here
great.
who's going to share.
Good evening. This is our annual notice. We, by statute, have to, as a district and as you as a board, need to decide which path you decide to see or to listen to expulsions. We have historically used an independent hearing officer in the event that the district pursues an expulsion for a student. That independent hearing officer is a non-partial. We contract with them. They come up and they hear the evidence and then they make that determination. That determination then does come back to the board in a closed session where you make the final decision from there, but the independent hearing officer hears that initial hearing. And so the resolution in front of you this evening is my request, the district's request, to continue that use of the independent hearing officer through the next school year for the 22-23 school year. We bring them back every year after July 1st.
Do board members have any questions of Caleb with respect to the recommendation?
How many expulsions do we do in an average year? How
I
many did we do last year?
Last year we had one.
'Cause I don't recall, we vote on it, right?
Yeah, there was one that came forward early in the year. I do everything in my power to give kids alternatives to expulsions. We do pre-expulsion agreements or abeyances. You'll hear that often. We do Our student services team really definitely takes a look at to make sure that the student is receiving the services that they need. And so the last resort in many cases is expulsion, unless there's an offense that is statutorily required for us to bring them forward. And we haven't had one of those yet for a while. And so we have reduced those numbers. We really do try to find alternatives. It is not something that I enjoy doing, bringing them forward. We want students to succeed, and having them out of school isn't one of them. So we don't oftentimes bring them forward. Last year we had one.
Some homebound things.
Yep, we'll do expel bound, we'll do homebound. We have some alternative programs that we partner with.
Virtual.
We'll do some virtual options. We also make sure that the student doesn't have a disability. And so oftentimes if an event comes up, we'll double check to make sure that happens. And in some cases, we'll go back through an evaluation and determine whether the child is eligible for a disability and an IEP in that realm. So we really do cross all the boxes off before we bring it forward to that independent hearing officer as well as to you. Yes.
Caleb, just curious,
Yeah.
to contract the independent hearing officer, is there a one-time cost? Is it per case? Like, how do we contract?
It's per case.
Okay.
Yep.
And just a comment, I really appreciate having a hearing officer. They are presented all of the information. All of that information does come back to the board so that we have all the information. But as a board member who has sat through some of the expulsion hearings with the parents and the students, sometimes the students, you may know the family, or you may know it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
I think having all the information given with a hearing officer is really a positive for the board, and for also, I think, for the student, for the parents. So I really appreciate that.
It's working well.
It really is.
In the event of an expulsion, it's really nice to provide that opportunity for the family to come in and have that non-threatening. I mean, it's a
Right.
really challenging situation. And, you know, in my position, I work with the families all the way through those spots. So we talk about what the situation is. We talk about what the process looks like. And so we actually work with the family from the moment those decisions are made. And I work with administration and the family on both sides. And so we make sure that they understand what we're doing coming forward and who those individuals are.
Any further questions of Caleb with respect to the appointment of an independent hearing officer for expulsions for the 2022-2023 school year? Hearing done, I would look for a motion to approve the use of an independent hearing officer to determine student expulsion cases as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Chris and a second by Mike. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you.
All right, we will move into item 13, general, and that is the school board and superintendent goals for 2022 and 2023. So I think I'll turn it over to Corey to work through the goals that we asked her to bring forward tonight, and then we'll do board goals after that.
So as was discussed at the retreat, I've put together 4 goals that I'd like us to consider. The first being that I will mentor, support, and transition the 2 new educational services directors throughout the year. Frequent and ongoing meetings focused on student learning and positive outcomes, as well as growth for all, will be implemented. And then number 2, a budget evaluation decision model will be developed to determine a process that will guide the close internal review of budget efficiencies and approaches to addressing any potential budget deficits. Third, I will work to create a strong and positive superintendent-school board relationship so that we can together accomplish identified priorities focused on the 2022-2027 strategic plan. And then lastly, develop a fluid document, which is the superintendent focus priorities and strategic initiatives that I shared at the retreat, that will serve as a roadmap for the work emphasis for this year and into future years.
So I guess I'll open it up for board questions or comments with respect to the goals that Corey has laid out.
Corey, just to reiterate what I've said before, I look over, and the public too, as they look over the initiatives that you have as far as a roadmap for this year and the future years, those are pretty lofty. I think that they do an excellent job of listening to concerns of board members, listening to concerns of our staff and our public. And I want to thank you for taking on some real meat in your goals and overview, I should say, and not just leaving it to a fluff. So I think that those are things that the district really needs, and things that you've learned from your time here, but also that you've gathered from listening to constituents. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
And I echo Dennis's sentiment. Oh, sorry, did you raise your hand?
No, go ahead.
Thank you, because to Dennis's point, this document is, it's fluid, but everyone can see it, and I appreciate the visibility and the transparency, and I do appreciate you listening to, kind of soliciting feedback on what's top of mind for us, and,
Good.
yeah, thank you.
Jen.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thank you for having 4 very specific goals. Have you given any thought to how you want to measure those?
Yes. So I think the work with Chris and Jeff, we already have started ongoing meetings. So we've got a working agenda that we'll continue to work on together. The work that Chris and Jeff do in Ed Services is really about positive outcomes for kids. So it's going to be our evaluation data, our assessment data with students, and then our informal work that we do with students on a regular basis. So we'll be watching those test scores and data.
Do you have any, you're going to watch them, obviously, you want to improve on
Yep.
them, but do you have any goal for to what extent you want to improve? Are there any specific areas that maybe you're going to focus within all of those metrics? Because there's a lot of metrics,
Yes.
right?
DPI just released last week our last year's data. So to me, Jeff, that's really our new baseline.
Yes.
Because everything prior to COVID, there's such a difference now in where kids are at. We're going to use that as a baseline. So I'll be able to give more specifics as far as where I want to go once I really dig into that.
Okay, and then for number 3, it says work to create a strong and positive superintendent and board relationship. How would you measure that one? What would you use to measure that for metric?
Well, I think frequent communications with the board. I mean, how are we doing together as a board and superintendent? What does our school perception survey results say at the end of the year? There's room for improvement there. I think that staff have told us in surveys. I believe the community and parents have told us in surveys and feedback that we can do a better job advancing the district. So I would again use those tools as a resource.
We used to do a board survey, which might also be used as a tool to measure performance and the relationship. So, we could continue to use that as well.
Okay.
My comment, because I know that was a concern of yours before, is about how we're going to measure those goals at the end of the year. I would recommend, actually, as far as the communication, is to develop a survey of the different components of communication and relationship with the board members, and have us fill that out for feedback to you. That might be a measurement. And as far as the measurement with the mentoring of our new administrative staff, the data in itself may or may not reflect that we've done a good job mentoring, because of the whole, the whole district's responsible for those. So you may be just lucky or unlucky, depending upon the work everybody else did. So I think maybe some kind of an ongoing record that you keep in terms of the meetings that you have with them, the responsibilities that you're giving them, just anecdotally, some things that they've learned throughout the year, and their own feedback in terms of how they're adjusting, and perhaps even having conversations with staff in terms of what kind of services they're receiving from them, their perceptions of them. I think a little bit more breadth that way, because I think the data is important as a district, but that doesn't reflect upon in terms of your mentoring of them, if that's your
Right.
goal.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Go ahead.
And I'm just curious for goal number 2 on the budget evaluation decision model, like what does success look like? So I appreciate, right, that it's going to be developed, but then what does success look like, or what outcome are we looking to achieve for goal number 2?
Right, so we'll develop the model, and then we'll actually begin to implement that model.
Okay, so implementing the model might be the success
Sure,
measure.
that's
Okay.
that's a
The
measure.
build and implement,
And
yep.
and sharing that model with us. And then
Yeah.
that's something, obviously, then at some point in time, we'll start using that model and hopefully we'll be able to address either deficiencies in our budget, et cetera. I think that's real important.
Right.
But I
And
think the
then-
model itself is the
build-out.
product.
Exactly.
That board survey that you mentioned, Jeff, is that, you said we haven't done that, is that the one that WASB puts out for us to survey ourselves?
Where does that come from?
We had created a board survey. We did it for about 4 years. I believe it was based on some WASB recommendations as well as some additional models. The board looked through it and approved it. We were doing it in March of each year, end of March of each year, because we were looking for input from the existing board versus the board that you create after an election. And it was really board members' perception about the board's work on a number of different topics. So it was us as board members identifying where we individually felt that things were going well and areas where we felt that things weren't going so well. And then we would take a look at that, and actually, this was, again, pre-COVID, and it stopped during COVID, but then that was part of what informed us as we began our board retreats, and as we, as board, set our goals for the next year, was taking a look at what were the strengths that we had identified as a board and the weaknesses we had identified as a board, the room for improvement areas
Yeah.
that we had identified
Opportunities.
as opportunity for improvement that we had identified to help us inform how we as a board wanted to move forward.
But I think that's a separate instrument and tool and purpose than what we're referring to as far as your evaluation of that particular
Right.
goal.
Yep.
I think that can be much more focused and pointed regarding our relationship and,
Agreed.
and the forms of communication and trust and,
Yep.
and all those things that you'll come up with.
There were questions specifically about the relationship in that survey, weren't there? With the-
There
with the
were a
superintendent?
few related to the.
You could
yeah,
pull
board
from those for
superintendent
sure.
relation- Yep.
She could pull from those. yeah.
We'll look for that.
Yep.
Resurface that. Thank you.
Are there any other further questions or thoughts from the board with respect to the superintendent's goals? I just want to note for the first one, because when you read it, for someone who's maybe out in the community, a big goal is, working with, Chris and Jeff. And I think it's just being able to point out the reality that in our top 3 administrative positions related to ed services, and then, of course, the superintendent's position and the assistant superintendent position, everybody's new. And although Corey's been with us for 4 years as first the director of elementary ed and then as the assistant superintendent and director of elementary ed, she is new in her superintendent role. Chris is new to us in the director of elementary ed and assistant superintendent, and Jeff is new to us as director of secondary ed. And we are a large district, and there is a lot to learn about the district and the movement forward. That doesn't mean that we don't expect them to, kind of rest on their laurels throughout the year, but there's that ability and the real need for Corey to be able to really work to create that effective, efficient team of leadership moving forward. Dennis?
Just to tag on that a little bit.
Yep.
I think that's 100% accurate, but I see it in a little bit different light. We're not getting 7th round draft choices here.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
who are just learning the system, we're going to sit the bench for 2 or 3 years. We actually are bringing in the Aaron Rodgers, and what I've seen of some of the work of these new staff, I'm pretty impressed by it. So I think we brought in highly capable people, people who know our district, people who've had similar positions and been effective in other districts. And I would hope, I think the mentoring is really important, obviously, but I think that they'll take off and have taken off, from the get-go. This isn't, this isn't a group that, in my opinion, that needs a huge learning curve. They're ready to go, and that's why I hired you. And that's why we hired you and as well, because you're people who can do the job and do it now. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any further conversation? So we have on the agenda, action as appropriate. And so I leave it to the board if we want. We did not approve the superintendent's goals as presented at the last meeting. So I leave it to the board to determine whether we want to, I think in the past, we have actually taken official approval of the superintendent's goals for 2022, 2023 as presented. If anybody would like to make that motion.
Before we make the motion, I would like to act on it when we have determined how we're going to measure them.
Okay.
If that's, can we do that?
I was going to suggest passing the goals now with the expectation that the superintendent bring back the evaluation method at a
I'd be happy to do that
nearby
as well.
future meeting. That way she can get
But I
going
want-
on them.
Yes, and I'd like to make sure that.
Right.
that
We want to
that
see
is
the
included,
evaluation
that we
tool.
circle back,
Yeah, and we want to have feedback on
Is
it.
that a motion?
My motion is to approve the 4 superintendent goals at this time with the understanding that in a very near future meeting, that we'll have the evaluation technique shared with us for input as well as passing.
Okay.
Approval.
Okay, so that's a motion
I'll
by
second that.
Dennis, and I think I had a second by Jen ahead of you.
Jen beat me.
She snuck in there.
You're sure.
Any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. So we will move into the school board goals. At our retreat, the board appointed a subcommittee of board members, G and Jen and Barb, to meet and to bring back to the board for consideration some thoughts. And so I'm going to turn it over to that group to present.
I'll just quickly open and want to thank Barb and G. So we met, and there were 3 goals that we created, and we'll each share one of the goals with you. But what we wanted to do was to ensure that each goal, that you were very clear on what specific action or actions we would take for that particular goal, what outcomes or outcome we were looking to achieve. And we wanted to tie every single goal to a school perception metric, because I think that survey is there's a lot of good data there. I think we have, to Corey's point, lots of opportunity. And so that's how we've drafted the goals. So you'll hear each one of us go through. G will talk about committee structures, given that he's a committee chair. We have community engagement as goal 2, and Barb will share community engagement, and then I'll close with the communication goal. And then I think we'll open it up for discussion after that. So I'll hand it off to you, G.
Okay, you wanted me to discuss goal 1?
Yes.
Okay. A couple of these I think we're doing, but I think to use a current word, we want to codify it to make sure in the future that it's done all the time. So the one, the superintendent or the designee meet monthly with committee chairs. I've only been a committee chair for a little while, and I've had that meeting already with you or Chris or Jeff. But we want to just say that we're gonna have that. I mean, that's one of the things we do each month, okay? That it's not, I guess we do it because we think we should do it. It's gonna happen, okay? That's one of the suggestions. The standing agenda item on each time we get one of these, we want to have one, we're suggesting to have one item that says anybody got something that they want to talk about at a future meeting, and that we could suggest that at that time in the board arena. And then the communication venues with Sarah, monthly email to staff, or Facebook, something. I know she's doing all kinds of stuff right now to share highlights. And I can't remember, was this the in-between newsletter we get as a board?
I think
Did we discuss
that's
that?
separate.
That's separate.
I think with this one, we were saying that there's so much good information that just doesn't get presented at the board level, right? So like the dental, right, program that we discussed, like how do we get that in front of parents and teachers, et cetera. So that's separate from, maybe you want to,
Yeah, Sarah does so much, and sometimes I get the feeling that if you don't know what's going on, it's because you didn't look for it. And we're asking her to do some more, to make other ways to get to parents as to what's happening in the district.
so
Fair.
Sarah she does that kind of communication that for the teachers.
Yep.
And I'm unsure if we get specific in terms of just highlights of committee. So maybe if something doesn't get put on, if there's just a highlight that we want it, that's where she can add it. I would also share, G, that I do agree that the onus is on each individual to find the information. I will share with you as a parent, I don't find it easy to find. And so if I wasn't a board member, I wouldn't be able to find the committee meeting. I could, but it's not easily accessible, in my opinion. So are there ways that we can share? And maybe, and we can talk about this, it's sharing with the principals at Cascade to their schools. I don't know. But that was, I think, something that you said, Chris, is that there's so much good information at the committee meetings. How do we get it to the public? And so that was just one way that we talked about addressing it.
Did you want us to comment on each goal separately or in the end?
What's the desire of the chair?
It's up to the subcommittee. Do you want to present the whole thing, the three of you?
Let's
and then
just go one. I
have
think
us
one at
walk
a time
through?
is good. Timely feedback.
Okay.
So I'm kind of having a hard time understanding the second part, creating a standing agenda item to solicit potential topics from the committee at the end of each meeting. So we have, I'm not sure, how many members do we have on the committee?
8, 9.
We have 3 board members and 2 community members and a student,
Okay,
typically.
right. So just playing devil's advocate here. So we have a number of people who say,
Or should be 4 board members.
yeah,
Four
it
board
could
members.
be,
I'm
right,
sorry,
right.
4 board members, 2
Okay.
community members.
So we have a number of people say, well, I would really like to have this as a topic, or I'd like to have this as a topic. Now we've got maybe 5 people, 3, 4, 5, who want something to be a topic. And are you saying you want that to be a standing item for a committee agenda, for a board agenda? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if a board member or someone on the committee or even someone in the public wants something to be on an agenda, the process and procedure we have now is to contact the administration and say, I'd like to have a discussion with the board. Is this a possible agenda item? Because the administration knows maybe what we're doing about that item or what we're not doing about that item or what we could be, and saying, you know what, this is something we should have a discussion about. E-learning was an example.
Yes.
Okay, you're a parent, and e-learning is an example, and I think you said that you brought that forward. It came to the committee. The committee had a discussion with input. We had administration there, Chris and Jeff were there, Corey was there, and said, this is something that we need to look into. So for me, that's a great process. That's the way it should happen. To have a number of people say, well, I'd like to talk about this, let's make an agenda item. I don't see that as a standing item. I think the process we have, if there's anyone who wants, and I know over the years, board members have said, I'd like to have this as a discussion item. For me, the people that we have in our departments, so that would be curriculum, that would be business services, transportation, food service, special ed, all of those people have so much more information about how our district is operating and all of those items. If you have a question, if there's something that we need to address or fix or improve, I would want it to go through the administration. So I'm not really sure what having a standing item as an agenda would mean. Because I think right now, if someone needs or wants something on agenda, whether it be someone in the community or someone on the board, or one of the committee members says, this is something I think we should be looking at. We have professionals who can bring that back to either committee or say, we're already doing that, or we've tried that, and it turned out that instead we're doing this, so. That's just the standing item, agenda item doesn't, for me, I think the first one is great. As a chair of a committee, I always met with a group. I never put things on the agenda. The administration came through. I set the structure of the agenda, or the committee meeting. You know, if something needed to go to the board and be an action item or a presentation. And I think it's really important, again, to have the people who are in charge of that department, whether it be business services, educational services, personnel, at that committee meeting, whoever, to set that up. So I like that. And I like number 3, because we've had presentations that are just amazing. And you're like, I want everyone in the community, I want parents to know this. So if there was a tool we can use to do that. But again, the second item, I'm not very comfortable with.
Dennis?
I'm a bit ambivalent on the second item. I would point out that, or share that I've been a part of 3 of the 4 districts I've been a part of. That was something that they discussed at the end of every committee meeting, every board meeting. And it doesn't mean that the board's going to, or the committee's going to act on it. It's just an opportunity for our community members and our board members to say, hey, this is something we'd like you to look into, and then the leadership of that committee and the superintendent would enact on it. I'm not uncomfortable also of saying, at the end of every meeting, saying, we'd like, if any of you have agenda items, please share it with the superintendent. What I'm not comfortable with is asking myself or other board members, if you have questions, concerns, perceptions, you should go to each individual department and share and
No,
try to get things
no.
through. I think that's ineffective, and it's not our job.
Right.
So, but I'm comfortable either way. I certainly don't have a problem bringing it up at the committee and say, hey, are there any ideas out there? That's kind of the transparency that, most people are comfortable with. Is there danger to it? A little bit, sure. But I think you have to trust your committee members, and this is not something that's open to all members of the public expounding upon things. It's your committee members who may or may not have some desire in terms of having input on that agenda. On the other hand, if people aren't currently doing that, I think it's just good to remind every meeting and say, you have an opportunity for input. Please see Corey and share that with them. And then Corey would bring it up at those meetings with the department heads and say, hey, this is what I heard. So it takes a little more impetus on the behalf of committee members. I think that's fair to ask that.
And I didn't mean that they should go to each department.
No.
Absolutely not. No, I would want them to go through the administration.
The superintendent.
Corey, yeah, the superintendent and that. For me, having a standing agenda item saying, so what would you like to see? I think it opens it up.
I think it's how you ask it too, right? So it's like, does anyone have a topic that they would like to be considered for future agenda, as a future agenda item, would be like how you would phrase it,
Yeah,
right?
pretty straightforward.
Right, and I would see, like, board members would have already gone to
I hope so.
Corey in advance, so I really just see that as an opportunity for community members, like the citizen members, to say, you know what, Corey, there's one thing maybe we look at, and she can go on, I don't know, so this.
And I think our community members might be less inclined to go to the
I
superintendent.
agree with you 1,000%,
And that's why I
which
think
is
at the
why I
committee
think
level-
this was,
Yeah,
right.
At the committee level, it might be something to try and see if
Yeah.
it, is a disaster or not, because those people are on there to give their input, and a lot of times, first of all, they're not part of the system as you are, and they're not the same kind of stakeholders, so they may not feel comfortable saying, I want an appointment with Corey to share this idea. They may just say at the meeting, and then they can kind of gauge, well, are the people interested in it? And the other thing is, just so they know, is there's not a big discussion. After someone brings it up, you're not having a full-blown discussion on the pros and cons of it. They just bring up and say, hey, would you consider the following topic? And that's the end of discussion. It's not there for, at that point, discussion to say whether it has merit or not.
Yeah,
So,
I just think it's a slippery slope, and I think committee members do that. I've seen things come out of committee having a conversation on an agenda item, and the administration takes note of it, and if it's something that, should come forward, it's just my opinion.
I want to speak to number 1, because I've been on the board, we've had a number of committee chairs. There are committee chairs who have the ability to come in and meet. There are also committee chairs who don't. They work full-time. And so what I have seen with committee chairs is they work with the department head to create that communication preparation system that works best for them. And so it's happening right now, that committee chairs are in communication with those department heads that they are working with. But the reality is that some people can meet during the day and some people can't.
What
So
department
if what
heads?
we're saying
I
with,
understand what you mean by department heads.
well, the directors who are the reporting directors to that committee. So for example, for Mike as Chair of Business Services, it's reaching out to Tom Owens and it's reaching out to Beth. For you, it's reaching out in however you determine, whether it's Chris used to meet with the department, with the director of elementary ed, the director of secondary, director of student services, the tech person, Brian.
All in one meeting.
To really more inform them about what's going to be coming forward on that agenda for that committee chair than to chair that meeting. And, each committee has 1 hour. So I know in the past, there've been times where a committee chair will look at what's being brought forward and say, I don't know if we're gonna have enough time. Let's make sure we put the substantive action items at the front of the agenda and maybe the ones that are less needed for action. But at least in the time I've been, on the board as president, there has been communication between the chair of that committee and those directors who are their administrative duty, have the administrative duty for that committee. So I'm not saying I'm in disagreement about saying, hey, you should be doing this, but I don't think it needs to be a physical meeting, because some board members, they just can't do
I
it.
think we use the word meet loosely. So, right, so it's virtually, or, so maybe it's
Discussion.
communicate or connect. So
Yeah.
I think maybe it's semantics.
And it's not any different than what you and I mean, potentially you could work. I don't work either. But we could be people who have jobs, and yet we have a responsibility to meet on a once-a-month
To reach
basis.
out. Right.
To reach out. And if we weren't able to attend, we would do it another way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But you
But I will
still
tell you
have-
that's happening, that's been happening ongoing. It's just happens behind the scenes with the chairs of those.
So could we
departments.
just-
But what I hear you saying,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
You
could
go
you
ahead.
change
Ladies
that
first.
word
Ladies
from
first.
meet to communicate or coordinate or something like that?
Coordinate's a
Which
good
they're
word.
doing right now anyway.
But I like your point, is to say that this is something that, right now it happens because maybe it's important to you or important to you. Maybe another committee chairperson is not as important to, but what we're saying is there's an expectation that committee chairs meet or
Either
Connect.
Again, by
Connect.
that word,
Connect.
meet.
Yeah.
connect with,
Collaborate
Absolutely.
with.
Yeah.
how they would do that.
I mean,
Go with that, Meg?
any acronym. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I
then-
think as I said, it's been happening. So
Right.
it's just
a
that
good
it's
point,
been
though.
happening behind the scenes.
Well, the
You know,
point-
just like our agenda, setting our agenda is a
Right.
meeting that happens monthly, but, it happens with the superintendent.
Right.
Right.
But I would say the same thing would happen at the committee level. You have a meeting, you have a physical meeting to set the agenda. And
But-
we
but-
should, if we can, have a physical meeting.
Well, that's up to, I think, each committee chair based on what their,
So for example, agenda setting this month, one person was virtual.
I was
and
there, by the
other
way,
was
just so you know.
in person, but we still had a meeting.
Are you saying that, say, in my case?
Yep.
I would communicate with Chris and Jeff, could communicate throughout the month, how is this, how on this, and then eventually they could get a list to me, say, this is what we think you want, what we think we want and what you wanted. Is it okay, and we don't have to have a physical meeting, that this agenda, And if I said, I don't think it's okay, we should meet, then we would meet, right?
Right. And the goal has been that those meetings take place prior to that agenda being posted, so that the committee chair and the directors of that department have had an opportunity to talk about that agenda before it gets posted.
So who reaches out first?
I think you can solve it yourself. Committee, between the committee chair and
I could be
superintendent.
sitting there waiting and waiting. What
Gee,
does Chris think about?
If you look at your committee, the agendas on your committee, the work comes from the administration. So, educational services, the people who are in charge are saying, these are the things that we're going to need, look at, approve to operate the curriculum in the district, okay? And here's what we're proposing the agenda for that committee meeting be. You have questions, concerns, or whatever, you can, I'm sure you've been getting information on the committee
I
meetings.
think we had, before this last one, we didn't have much communication.
You and I sat down and had a meeting, your
yes.
very first one, and we went through the agenda together. And then the next one, I don't think you were at, and then the last one,
We met the Thursday before we published the agenda.
Right. I think we should,
So it was a virtual connection. 'Cause, yeah.
I think you should leave it to the committee chair. Obviously,
think
there's
it's
got to
I
be,
think it should be up to the committee chair, because it's truly their responsibility
Own it.
to educate themselves on what is on that agenda so that they're able to effectively run that meeting.
right.
That has been the purpose behind it.
And Gee, if you wanted to have an ongoing standing
Meeting,
with whoever prior to the committee being had, I think that'd be perfectly fine.
So I think I hear G saying is we created this goal so it's required versus optional,
Right,
and
that's the important
it's
thing.
it's clearly defined. And what I hear everyone else saying is to change the word meet, which some may perceive as physical meeting, to connect, because it's going to be what works best for the committee chair.
correct.
Yep, I'm comfortable with that.
Are you, G?
So we're gonna change it to say the committee chair, I mean, how do you say that? I mean,
you could say coordinate or
I would think
I
the
would say
Collaborate.
connect.
collaborate.
Collaborate,
chair,
yeah.
the committee chair will communicate with their administrative designees
We already have
prior
collaborate on it.
to the agenda being posted.
Yep.
Okay,
I mean, that's
sounds
That's
good.
kind of what's been happening. The administration brings forward the items, and again, the conversation is really more logistical and preparatory than it is creation of an agenda.
But again, the administration will bring forth most of it, but that does not indicate that a committee or committee chair will not have things to put on that agenda.
The committee chairs have no authority to put items on the committee agenda under our policies.
So really, there's no, why do we collaborate then if there's no input on the agenda?
Because the committee chair is the committee chair to run the meeting. They are not creating the agenda. The agenda is created through administration in terms of the
Content.
business that needs to move forward through those committees. Because so there's a policy, we have a policy that basically states that no one board member has authority to direct anyone in this district to do anything. So no one board member, whether they're a chair or an individual board member or the president of the board, has independent authority to put a particular item of business on an agenda. There's a policy that notes that the president, vice president, and superintendent are responsible for creating the board agenda. But in terms of those committee agendas, they have been historically the business of the district as determined from the ground up, through the schools, through the directors, through the superintendent, through the committees,
So
through the
that's-
board.
That's very interesting. So if, as a committee person, if I wanted to have an agenda item, that's why I go to you.
That's why you go
And then
to,
if you put a kibosh to it, really, the board, what is our avenue then at that point?
The full board could direct me to do something.
And how does that board member get on the agenda to bring that up then?
the board member would approach the president and the vice president.
And if they quash it, what is their recourse?
Dennis, you know, I don't know because
Okay.
it's never happened.
Well,
It's never,
Yeah,
it's,
Oh,
well,
yes, it
it's never
has
happened.
right.
Yes, it has.
I guess we're getting off, but thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
And that is why it's really important at the end of the meeting then to, or during the meeting to bring it up so that you do have
Well,
that kind of
I
input.
would hope that before it came up at a committee meeting, that I would be aware of it. If there's community members approaching you about something they're concerned about, I sure hope that I would know that. If they're not comfortable, I understand. Hopefully, they'll start to gain trust and feel comfortable doing so, but if they go to you first, please let me know that.
Yes.
I mean, that's important to me.
Okay, fair enough.
I just want to add on to what you said, Meg, about the role of the chair. I do think that the chair, and so in like Ed Services, it would be G, does have input in terms of like the sequencing of the topics, prioritizing like how much time we may spend.
Yep.
I mean, so.
Correct.
I mean, so it,
Structure, yeah.
right.
Correct.
Okay.
And I will tell you, in the past, when items came up, I would keep a running list, because there's certain things that have to happen at certain times
Right.
during the year, and then the others we can fill in as time allows. So I always had that running list of items that either community brought up, staff brought up, board brought up.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Let me ask
Thank you,
this
Nick.
question, and this refers kind of to the second one, the e-learning. What was the genesis of that topic?
That was me.
So,
Jen contacted the
I
superintendent.
got feedback myself, members of the community, parents. I took the feedback to Corey. We had a discussion, and she said, you know, she recommended that we take it to the committee, and then that's how we had that discussion.
So I couldn't do that.
No, you can do that.
absolutely.
That's
what we're encouraging you to do.
We've been encouraging board members, if you have ideas or questions or concerns are raised from the community, we as a board have been providing the superintendent with that opportunity as the head of our district to be able to have that initial communication and conversation with the board member, to be able to flesh out with that board member where, I mean, is this something you're hearing from the community? Is this something that you're interested in? What is your interest? What is your concern? Is it something we're currently doing at our district? Is it something we've tried in the past and it hasn't worked? Are we fundamentally overwhelmed right now, but we'll put it on a list and get back to you? Or, Jen, you know what? Great, let's get it on the committee and let's move forward. Oftentimes, when a board member brings an idea to administration, nobody hears about it because administration just does it. It's an idea, it's a problem that gets solved behind the scenes, which is the most immediate, most effective, most efficient way to do it. And otherwise, we're 9 board members. We're all part-time. These are our experts who we hire to work for us. And for us as board to be asked to react to like a general topic without any sort of proposal through administration has us all with no clue or understanding about what it is we're talking about, what the background information is, what the purpose is. And so how we've been operating is if board members have ideas, thoughts, questions, we've been asking, sit down with the superintendent, have that conversation with her, explore the topic, allow her to take it to her cabinet, have them discuss it, allow them to draft a proposal that responds to the concern that can then come back to the committee and to the board for decision. We've had some topics, frankly, that we as a district have been struggling, in particular for financial reasons, to come up with a viable, sustainable proposal. That doesn't mean administration isn't trying to figure it out, because they are. So in terms of the agenda item, my concern is what was happening with this board a number of years ago, where board members were bringing, this was an agenda item, and board members were coming forward and requesting that items get on the agenda. Meetings were happening till 2:30 in the morning. The superintendent had no clue what was going on. Board members were talking about, they didn't know what they were talking about because there wasn't a proposal in front of them. And by having that first conversation in public, for many people, it creates an expectation that something's going to come back. And if it doesn't, oftentimes because it's already been resolved, the superintendent, frankly, is the one left hanging as to, well, wait, we said you should do this, why isn't it getting done? And so that's why we've tried to provide the superintendent with that courtesy and respect for board members with ideas, because we all come from all different walks of life. We all have different good ideas, but to allow that professional and her team to be able to vet, understand, and do all the behind-the-scenes work to bring forward a complete proposal that this board can look at and make a decision on.
Just to clarify, of course, to date, certainly, everything I've seen and heard when people have brought an idea to you, certainly you followed through on it, and I know that's just your style. There's one little danger of people, and I'm not sure, I don't have the answer right now, but there's a danger of individual board members coming to you because it may be something that the general board has an interest in and perceptions on, and if individuals come to you and then you begin to work with it on your staff and addressing it, by the time it comes out, we haven't heard from the other board members yet. So I don't know exactly how that is, but I think on some things you would probably say, that's a good idea, I think we should bring it to the entire
Absolutely.
board. And I would use your
Bring it to the
discretion on that as well.
Absolutely. Just like Jen's example.
Exactly.
I mean, that was one that definitely we wanted the committee to hear, provide some input, then we're gonna go back and figure out
Exactly.
a solution.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then eventually to the board, right?
Correct. But I like the third one. But I also believe Sarah provides many avenues of communication. The reality in this world today is people are so busy that oftentimes it's an ongoing issue of how do we encourage the public to access all of the great information. One option for us that we could look into, which we haven't, part of the reason we bring stuff from committee to the board is because we want the public to hear about it, because we don't tape or stream our committee meetings. Now, the positive to that is it allows the committee meetings to be more relaxed, more free flow, more not in the camera. But maybe that's something that we could ask administration at least to look at what that would take for us to be able to at least tape the wonderful presentations that staff brings forward to us that would be then accessible to the public. Because right now, the only way the public learns what happens at a committee meeting is for us to redo it at the board meeting. And we don't have the time to redo all of it.
Right.
And I think it would be important for us to look to see what kind of viewership there is. I mean, how many people are actually looking and viewing this information
Correct.
before we consider that for committees.
Correct.
Well, I can relate a story about that from DC Everest. I was talking to a teacher in one of their classes up at their middle school, and they instituted this program last year where you could opt to, every time something was entered on your student's grade sheet, whatever, in cyber sheet, they would get a ding on their phone. And they said the usage went way up the first quarter, and then it went, just virtually stopped the second quarter, because they had reached the saturation point.
Right.
People didn't want that. So there, the question is, what level of information do you want to put out? It can get so minute that people are, what's the word for it? They're just snowed under by information. TMI.
Yep.
Where do you stop?
Right,
Right.
and so maybe the cadence is quarterly, but if you look at the school perception metric that we're trying to tie it to, the admin does what it takes to make our district successful, the school board does. That's the work that happens oftentimes at the committee that doesn't get to the board. That is why we created
Yeah,
that goal.
yeah.
I mean, so I just want to go back to why we created that goal, and so to your point, right? Like, so I don't know what the right cadence is, and maybe there's a pilot to test, but I mean, and I'm gonna just share with you guys, a lot of people in the community don't even know we have committee meetings, and they don't know what the committee does. I mean, so there is opportunity
Right.
to educate,
Right.
right? I mean,
Many
we are in the
people don't know what
business
the
of the
board
board,
does.
so we know, but they don't.
Right. One thing that Sarah and I have discussed, and again, this is if we have time, because you know how
Right,
that goes.
right.
We would like to put out, we used to do a district, newsletter once or twice or 3 times a year that goes to the entire community that highlights some of those positive things. It might be time to reconsider doing something like that.
I mean, on paper?
Yes, a hard copy that would get mailed.
So didn't, they used to have something in the newspaper, they had a little section in the newspaper you could put stuff into? But I don't know how many people read newspapers.
Yeah, I don't know.
Newspaper, what's that?
Everyone approaches me.
Well,
You're
what-
right, though. We need to share our story. We're doing a great job. Sarah's doing a phenomenal job of getting information out. Some people read it, others people don't. They're just, they're tired of reading all the information. I think during COVID, where that was really our only form of communication, people did get overwhelmed. It was just way too much. So I think, maybe not as much verbiage and more photos and, quick videos.
We do have school newsletters.
Yep.
And this is like a tiny analogy, and I don't want to keep us going on this, but, I can remember when my son was in school, you'd get your weekly letter
Yep.
from the school with all this information. I cannot tell you how many parents had no idea what was in that newsletter. Like, we'd have field trips, and,
Right.
kids would show up without lunches because, I didn't know we were having a field trip. So people get overwhelmed in everyday life, and this is our priority. This is on our minds all the time, and we're always looking for those kind of things. But part of the thing is, especially with COVID, I'm not surprised at all.
Right.
How much is missing because so many things were changed.
In talking to the same teacher, her observation was, most parents I talk to just want to know if my kid's doing okay. That's all they
I know.
worry about, because they got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
Right.
So where are we landing with goal 1? And do you want us just to move to goal 2?
No,
Or do you want to vote per goal?
I would like to have just some kind of a decision on 1A, B, and C right down the line, and just say whether we're going to do it or not. And one, it sounds like, I haven't heard anyone say anything negative regarding number 1. 1A, I should say. And one,
Question if I can ever
go ahead.
get it in here. And the question on number 1 is, it states the superintendent or their designees. So the superintendent would have to determine who meets with the committee chair. Is that correct? The
Actually,
way this is written.
historically, it hasn't been the superintendent.
I'm asking, the way
Historically,
this
it's
is
been-
written, I'm asking the committee, is that what your intention is?
Yeah.
Right, and I think the reason why is because there was a gap between Chris, right, when Chris was here, so I think it was the superintendent, which is why I think it was written that way.
Is this the intention?
It says the superintendent or,
Or their designee?
yes.
Oh, okay, but if the superintendent the superintendent, if they're not appearing, has to designate someone else then, right? That would be their
of
responsibility to
her team,
designate.
right.
Okay. And then, there was also a comment that you made, it's not in here, and that was about, must, meet monthly. I don't know if that
Elaborate.
was just a off-the-cuff suggestion, or is that something that you really want to see in writing in a policy statement?
That, I think we had changed the word
changed
to
it.
collaborate.
Collaborate.
Well, the must is what I'm asking about. Not necessarily whether it's collaborate or work with or communicate with.
can put
Is
will.
it mandatory that you meet monthly?
So as
That we
someone,
collaborate monthly.
Collaborate monthly.
and as someone who will be designated as a designee, I would say yes. And from my understanding, the purpose really, when we met with G prior to our last committee meeting, it was, right, to give him the information he would need to be able to successfully facilitate that conversation as part of the committee meeting.
What
So-
would it take to not meet?
If we didn't have a
Would
meeting.
you have
the
to have
meeting.
a vote of the board to not have a committee meeting?
Or if we don't have items for a committee meeting, then we wouldn't have a committee meeting.
Then must is probably not the
So,
best word to use in there.
The way I've updated it is the superintendent or their designee collaborate monthly with committee chair in advance of every committee meeting, meaning if there is no committee meeting, then there would be no collaboration.
Yeah, the word
So that must then, that's what I
So
just want to
I-
clarify.
yeah.
I wanted to understand what your intentions were. Okay, thank you. And then if I can, on the second one, I was witness to the dark days of this board and the meetings that we had. And I've seen how, again, best intentions, people have good intentions, and I think everyone that I ever served with was absolutely dedicated to seeing our district succeed, and they all had the interest of the students in mind, but it didn't come across that way. They had their own way of correcting what they saw as the problems. They had their own way of identifying what they thought were the problems. And it made meetings awkward, to say the least. And if anyone is interested, I do believe all those meetings are archived, so they're all available for viewing at any time. If you want to see the dark side of that. And again, it was well-intended. And I think in concept, it sounds great, but I'll leave it at that.
I guess I'd like to, in the interest of Corey's goal of superintendent, not to put you on the spot.
It's okay.
Again, I've noted my concern about it because I feel like it potentially puts the superintendent in an awkward place. So I would like you to
Chime in.
chime in.
I guess this makes me nervous, I'm going to be honest, because I think there could be some surprises that I may not be aware of, and I would not be prepared to answer those questions. And that makes me nervous. I would like to at least give it a try in that if there are agenda items, you come to me, I could say, you know what, that's a really good agenda item. Let me put together a plan or a proposal and bring it before the board, or let me take it to committee, work through the committee process, and then bring it to the board. There have also been people come to me, board members and community, that have a question about a specific issue, and it's already been resolved. And, if that comes up at a committee, that's just strange. It just kind of puts all of us in an awkward situation. So I would like to try you coming to me. I'll keep a list, work through the process. If that doesn't work, then can we reconsider something different?
Can we just modify that to say, create a standing agenda item to direct committee members who have interest in potential topics to see the superintendent, of course, condensing that so it doesn't sound so awkward, but.
So we could do, how about, Dennis, we'll do what we do at board meetings, which is at each committee, at each board thing, we say, if you have questions or concerns or thoughts, please reach out to the superintendent.
But I would make it specifically to say, if you have agenda items in future, please reach out to the superintendent.
Yep.
Because that's really what we're trying to do, is give people input in providing suggestions for future.
But
committee
that's no
members.
different than what we do now.
Correct.
Do we say
Yeah.
that every meeting?
I would like to make a distinction between putting something on an agenda and getting something resolved.
Correct.
It doesn't have to be an agenda item.
I guess I would look to G. I think that this was, right, this one came from you. So I don't know if you want to modify or strike it entirely.
The standing agenda item. To have it listed on here that we will, at the end of each meeting, say, anybody got any ideas for the future, is, it's kind of tough. It's, I just want to make sure there's a way that says if, like, for the e-learning thing, people had concerns and they talked to you, right?
Yeah, I think there's different avenues. I think there might even be committee members that might want to just go to you, but then, right, we would go to court, right?
And then
Well, then it would.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
From us to you, it's this, Meg, you like this, it is the spokes in the wheel.
Yep.
And
They are
she's the
spokes in
hub.
wheel. Yeah.
I mean, and the community needs to understand that she's the hub.
Yep.
And that what comes to us 99% of the time is going to get an answer through Corey
That's true.
and her
Correct.
team and through our schools. Because they're the ones that have the information. And they're the ones that have an understanding of at what level it needs to be addressed. I won't mention a name, but we had a previous board member that would note, I may not know all the answers, but ask me a question, I'll find out the answer. And we kept saying, no, it's not your job to find the answer. It's your job to find the person,
Who can answer
superintendent, who can make sure that the person who has the answer can give you the answer. So we're not doing, in my mind, sometimes telephone tree. It's best for it to come from the source, from the teacher, from the principal, from the director of one of our offices, from our superintendent,
Well, and
from us.
Right, I have a suggestion. If we give this a try where you come to me with agenda items, I will add that as part of our survey that I'm going to create as one of my measurable outcomes. Give me your feedback on how this part of our relationship is working.
I think it's a good idea.
Well, I would, if we were to, and it's incumbent on each one of us, that I don't bring an item to you that I just think needs to be looked at. I would bring an item to you that other people have talked to me about, or that I may personally have experienced, and I know other people are experiencing it.
Sure.
But that would be incumbent on each one of us not to sit down while I'm going to talk to Corey about this, or I'm going to call Corey, see what's going on.
Yep.
You would have to have an accumulation of reasons to come to you.
So G, tonight on our board meeting were two suggestions that you brought forward to Corey with respect to the WASB resolution and with respect to the designee for our district for WASB. It was some information that you had received externally, and you knew there was a deadline of September 15th, and you reached out, and Corey put it on her superintendent's report so that that information could be communicated. And, you know, again, it worked, it works. And when board members have ideas, if you're out in the community or you hear about another district doing something, you know, I believe Corey and Chris and Jeff welcome that. Again, sometimes we're already doing something, or sometimes we've tried something, or maybe we're doing an alternative that our administrative team has determined works better. But ultimately, for us as board members, it's about us communicating from the community to administration. It doesn't have to happen at a committee meeting or at a board meeting. It can be that ongoing conversation and dialogue, because then items get resolved right away. They don't have to wait until the meeting.
Yeah, I would, just to get us going a little bit, I would suggest striking 2B, even though it's not labeled 2B, with the understanding that every board member fully understand that there is no excuse to say that you do not have input on the agenda, a committee agenda, because you have a process that we are all now codifying to say, please take it to the superintendent. And if we have bad experiences with that, we have avenues for discussing it later. But right now, let's give that a shot. And that is the method by which every single committee member, board member, community member also has an avenue for putting things onto the agenda if they are interested. And I disagree a little bit. Gee, I don't think you have to have 10 people behind you.
Right.
As a board member, I have perceptions and input, and it may just be mine. I'm going to go and share it with her, see where it goes from there, though. I think it's better if you can say, hey, I've had 30 people talk to me about this, but in some cases, it's, hey, this is something I want you to think about, or I want the board to have discussion on. So I don't want anyone to feel that you can't take it to the superintendent unless you have, anecdotal information from 20 other people.
So in
And
the
I
interest
would-
of time,
I would
I'm
note,
sorry, what
as
are we?
Jeff said, it's not only about something you want on an agenda, it's about issues that,
Correct. So like the e-learning, I did not go to Corey and say, I would like this as an
Right.
agenda item. I said, here is a challenge that I'm hearing. Here's who I'm hearing it
Right.
from. What are your thoughts for next steps? And she said, hey, I think this would make, so yeah, yes.
Okay.
In the interest of time, what would you like to do with goal 1? So 1A, I think we're clear. I rewrote it.
Looks good.
1B, I think we're,
Go away.
well, I want to be respectful to.
No, I think Dennis made a recommendation.
But I'm asking, that's what I'm recommending, but G may not feel comfortable with that.
I didn't suggest this item.
Okay. All right. Someone might not feel comfortable with
Committee's
it. then.
recommendation.
What's that?
I'm going with the committee's,
The board.
through committee recommendation
Okay.
on this. That's why it's here.
Did Barb have some input on this?
Sorry, Barb, are you there? Oh, we can't hear you.
Hold on, we got you on mute here.
She's probably been talking the whole time.
Hi, Barb.
Barb, did you have input on, specific to the soliciting potential topics at the end of every committee meeting?
Well, that wasn't I can hear myself now. That was an effort to get things on the agenda
Computer.
that people have tried to get on the agenda without success.
Being a new superintendent, are you open to giving it a try with how we've done it in the past?
Yeah, I am.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Are you comfortable with that, G, and just seeing how it goes and then perhaps?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we tried talking about this at the retreat a couple years ago, especially.
I think it's important to note that some veteran board members do not feel that the process has necessarily worked as efficiently as they had hoped. And now I hear the new superintendent say, hey, I'm new, I'm committed to this, give me a chance before you throw it aside. And I'm comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with that. Are
Yeah.
you comfortable? Okay.
Okay. Strike
And-
number,
So I struck
B.
1B, and then 1C, it sounds like, I mean, we gave a lot of different avenues. I don't think we need to land on what the avenue is, just knowing that we are going to be communicating more regarding the
That's good.
committee.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Move.
So moving on to number 2, which is Barb on community engagement goal.
Can you understand me from
a second.
this way?
I think,
Yep.
I think she needs to mute her computer so
Okay.
that echo.
Oh, could you mute your computer?
Turn your speaker off on
I
your
was thinking
computer.
maybe if you do that, then we won't have that feedback. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now is that better?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
That was actually Jeff's recommendation. I
Oh,
don't take
okay.
credit. Techie Jeff.
Okay, we've just been talking about the community and that they don't know necessarily what we're doing.
Barb, can you
Yeah.
turn the volume down on your computer?
You know, Jennifer, it would be easier if you just
Okay.
explained.
Okay. I'll do my best to represent you, Barb. I'll give it my best go.
Well done, Barb, well done.
I can start, Barb, and then you let me know if I missed anything that you'd like to add. So this, it was a community engagement goal. This was Barb's idea. I think Barb and G had a similar idea in the past, is to pilot. So note it's a pilot for the 2022-2023 school year, that each board member would, and we use the word adopt loosely, a minimum of one school, and we really would like for an increased focus and visibility and school board representation. That is what the outcome would be for this goal. If you go back and look at the school perception survey, we have lots of opportunity as it relates to everything related to the school board. We do feel like there's opportunities for us to just be more visible in the community and within our school district. And so this would be one of the ways. Now, one of the questions that came up while we were meeting in the subcommittee was, how would we identify which board member would be adopting each school? And it would be at random. I don't think it would be good for anyone to think that a board member is favoring any particular school, so it would be at random, and we would think there would be one enough, right, for each elementary school, bless you. And then if there's a board member that would want to take more than one, to get onto the junior high or high school, we could consider that. And I know, Barb, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but I know, this was, I think, something that you were in favor of in the past. I don't know if you would like
Well,
to.
I had told Corey this too, that it was a suggestion, not a suggestion, a person from a district in the south of the state talked about this at the convention, at Medina Convention. He wasn't the person presenting, but he was talking about it. Somehow he did that. But I will say that Corey has, we have an appointment next week.
Yep.
To talk about this very subject. I think you want more details to flesh it out. So with that in mind, maybe we want to wait. I don't know if you're willing to wait.
Yeah, and I just want to add, we did go on the WASB website.
Yep.
There was lots of articles out there that said that it is a best practice for school board members to, and I can send them all to you guys because I've kept kind of a copious.
Would you do that?
Yeah,
Is it-
to say that, I mean, it's listed there that this is what they do, this is why it's beneficial, et cetera. And I mean, I'm just looking at the brand of the school board, and we feel like this would be an opportunity
Are
for
you
us.
saying they are talking about adopting?
Of going to the schools,
Okay.
going to the schools for the plays. I
Okay.
mean, right, so
Right.
like we would say, like if someone had Bannock Elementary, right, like meeting with the principal to say, what are some key events for the year? And like show up at the events.
Okay. So, this is just my opinion.
So we're
I'm
going to
not-
talk
I-
about this right now.
Right,
Preliminary
somewhat.
information.
No,
Preliminary
I think the reasoning behind this, looking at that survey and understanding that the community, we would like to know more. We would like to be visible. But I think we have hundreds of things going on in our schools all the time. Presentations, all kinds of things that would allow us as board members to be at the school. My concern is adopting a school. What does that mean? Why are you there? When are you going to go during the day? And I can tell you, I've been in schools where there are parents who aren't there, there are students who are in classes. If you go to something that's an event and that, you get to meet with staff, with parents, with students, and there's no anyone's being concerned, why is the board member here? Why, are they looking, or what if you go into a school and you see something that's concerning, or something happens and you're having to deal with that? I would rather have the option of going to all the schools and not necessarily saying, this is a school, or give the what's the word? Having that school believe that you are their designated board member, and that's a concern. So I would rather use some kind of a tool, maybe with Sarah, to let board members know each month, these things are happening in our schools. Either a play or we went to some of the things that show successes in our schools. I would like to be able to go to all the schools and not necessarily say, I am the designee for this school.
Which, Chris,
But
I
th-
tried
this-
to do in the last board update. I don't know if you saw at the bottom.
I did.
I mean, of course, there's not a lot of things happening in our schools right now, but I
Right.
want to get in that habit of, in that board update every 2 weeks, here are some things that are happening, at SPASH, at Bannock,
Right.
at Boston School Forest, at
Right.
Pods, so that you know, here's some
Right.
things that would make sense for you to go to.
But that's on us. You know,
Well,
that's on
because
the
your-
board members.
Your work schedules are different. Your
Right, right. So I
I think
think,
Barb wants to say something.
Yep. Go ahead, Barb.
It doesn't mean that you can't go to things in other schools. I think this would just give the principals a connecting person, a liaison, if you will, so that maybe you would be asked to come to a special event, maybe get introduced, maybe say a few words. You know, right now, people don't know what we're doing, or even who we are, what we look like.
You know, this, Dennis, go ahead, but I have some more things to say.
First of all, I would not feel comfortable indicating, because I know that, not that I know everyone here, but I have a feeling that some board members would not feel comfortable being an adoptee to a building. Some board members may not even be comfortable going to buildings. Having said that, I personally believe that any organization, especially a school organization, the staff wants to know who the decision makers are. They want to know you. They also want to know that you understand what they do and that you know them. I'm a firm believer that district administration should have a strong, regular, consistent presence in buildings. And I believe that will happen, more so than it's happened in the past, probably. I'm very comfortable myself going into the buildings and developing those relationships. I think there's value in, because I've heard the argument, well, you go there and then they wonder what you're doing there. They only wonder because we're not there. But once there's more of a presence of board members, if that should happen, that goes away pretty quickly, because the same is true of administration. If you go into a room and you've never been there before, they wonder what the heck you're doing there. But if you're there every other day, now it's not a big deal anymore. I don't think that we need to be an impediment to instructional practices in the buildings, but I think there's value in us taking an interest in going to the buildings as our time permits. I have lots of time. I'm retired, I have no life, but some of you, you have other things that have a much higher priority, and I understand that, and I think that should be valued. I have no problem at all with the recommendation. I feel comfortable taking one or two buildings. On the other hand, I believe I'll be in the buildings regardless of whether we adopt or don't adopt, and I assume other board members would be, and I strongly encourage you to take an interest, because you do not know what impact that has for teachers and other staff members when you are there taking an interest in what they're doing. It is powerful, and as much as I can tell you that some people, they're not comfortable. Jeff.
Would you be addressing their concerns then? if they-
Absolutely not. That's not what I'm there for. But I am there to kind of get a tone for. First of all, I believe I have a sense of what happens in schools, because I've had some experience there. But to be in their school, like, for example, I did do a couple visitations at the very end of the school year, and you have a feeling tone for the administration and how they interact with the staff and how comfortable they are and the things they're excited about. And I never sat down and had a discussion about, well, blah, 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 because I'm not there to get gossip and rumor and to solve their problems. I am there as a board member to oversee kind of what's happening in the building, how are things going, and just to have a relationship. Now, I know a lot of educators, the older ones at least, but I think it is important for them to know that you are a human being and that you are there to express interest in what they're doing, because it's a different job than it was when we were going to school.
Right.
I think if the roles, exactly what you're doing in there is clearly defined.
By us.
Clearly
I think-
defined.
yeah, defined,
And-
yeah.
Because I think this could easily get away from you.
Yes.
You're right, and I agree, Jeff. If you go there, if you're an individual what goes there, and I want all the gossip, and oh yeah, don't worry, I'll take care of that, and you want to hear it all, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yes.
But at some point in time, we have to also have, this isn't the board of whatever, this is this board with these people, and
I think that every board member already has the authority to go in and introduce
You have the
yourself.
authority, yes.
You can do that. You can visit the schools. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with creating, good relationships. I don't know if I would want to have a written policy unless, again, it was extremely explicit. I do totally support board members participating in school activities. That's different than the day-to-day educational process that goes on. I think we could be as disruptive as would be helpful in some cases.
Yeah,
So we discussed if we decided to approve this as a board, that we would have very clear parameters up front that we would share with the principals of each of the buildings, that they would cascade to their staff, right, to create those guidelines. And Barb, correct me if I'm misstating, but I think the point of this goal is to have intentional connection and relationships with these schools, because yes, we all do have the ability to go in the buildings right now, but the reality is it's just not happening, and it hasn't happened. I mean, that historically it just hasn't happened, and that we're hearing from the community and we're hearing from the educators that there's no connection with the board. And so I don't think we can continue doing things the way we've been doing them, because clearly with this first percentile comparison as it relates to the school board, it's not working. So
It may be interesting, I'm sorry.
So at our board retreat, Shayna Lewis was there. And one of the recommendations she made to the board was that the board actually be very mindful about being in our school buildings. That being in our buildings when there are particular activities that the board and the community are invited to provides clear guideline and understanding. Both the community, I believe, and our school community, it's incredibly important if we want to allow Corey to be successful in her goal of superintendent board relations, is that we all have a firm understanding of what our role is and what the superintendent's role is. The superintendent is responsible for the day-to-day operation of our schools. She is, and again, this is my personal opinion, it's how I have operated and encouraged operation, for us to consistently communicate with our district and our community that Corey is the face of the community. The district.
well, I mean, you got a larger role. We didn't tell you yet, Corey.
She is the boss of our district.
Correct.
I'm not.
But we can still have a presence, is what we're saying.
We can, but I believe it has to be us there involved with official events versus us being in a place where we can very easily have a blurring of the lines of chain of command. And for people to believe that it's easier, again, as has happened in the past, to jump through the lines to board members. And it's a very, very, I believe, it's very concerning to me. It's being, and it's very difficult because we as board members are a policy-setting board. We are not involved in the day-to-day operations of schools. We not only have our constituency at our schools, we have our constituency in our community. I mean, we have about 7 or 8 different constituencies that we are answerable to. And so for me, again, and it's just me personally, for me it's been this bright line of being present where people understand I'm present as a member of the board for an official event, whether it be a graduation or a choir thing or Tiger Track or whatever. So people aren't surprised that I'm there. At one time, I attempted to be in the schools during the day working with United Way as a volunteer reader with students. And I was a substitute, and I was being moved to different schools depending on when they needed my presence. And I can tell you that while there were some people, members of the community, you know, that was okay, there were other people that were kind of like, why are you here during the school day? I mean, what's your purpose? And for me, it was a lesson to myself that I was blurring my role, because I wasn't wearing my board hat, I was wearing my volunteer community member hat, but members in the school weren't seeing me as a volunteer community member, they were seeing me as a board member. And that is a different perception. Go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you. First, I don't discount anything you've said, and I know that those are experiences that you've had, but it's been my experience, and as a superintendent who's had plenty of board members in a building on a weekly basis, that it doesn't undermine the superintendent having board members in the building developing those kinds of connections. To say that we wouldn't have any, to say that there was danger by, our attorney said that it could be dangerous to do that, it really sets up the tone of the disconnect that's being perceived by our staff and our community relative to our board members. I think that, again, there will be some board members who feel very comfortable. There's some board members who will not, either on a philosophical basis or a personal basis, will not feel comfortable. I just guess I'd be interested in how many board members would be interested in doing it, so that if we have enough momentum to even consider it further.
I think that's a good idea.
Before you do that, I have several things to say. First of all, as a teacher in this district, I would die for school board members to come in my classroom. It would be like the highlight of my day that they would come and take an interest in what I'm doing, unannounced. Most teachers I know are not afraid of that at all. They want you to know what they're doing. The other thing is, when I was talking to this guy about this, he says, I have a ball at my school. I'm Santa Claus for the Christmas stuff. I do all these things. So my view of this is, you're there to spread the happiness. Hey, pat you on the back. Great job. I see you're working with the music department. I'm looking forward to the Christmas, orchestra, things like that. And you wouldn't come unless there's an event, because there's no reason for you to be there. Meg, I know it. You don't want to be wandering around the school when you have no reason to be there. The reasons would be an event, and you would be there for an event, and you might stand in the back and you might strike up a conversation with Joe Smith, whose kid is in the 3rd grade, and who is that kid? Is that your kid over there? Yeah. All right. They like it? Terrific. We're having, and they would know you, and they would go home and they would say to their friends, I know this person on the school board. That's a big deal. And then you become a person and just not some nebulous school board thing, because it's easy to hate the school board, but not when you know somebody on it. It's the same thing with teachers. It's easy to hate teachers in general because they're greedy. All they want is more money. But your teacher of your kid is great. I've seen that too many times. And I'm not afraid of going into schools. In fact, as I look at it as like a plant manager wandering around looking at stuff. Hey, you having a good time? Do you like working here? Is this great? Yeah, great. You would be there for positive reasons only. And the first person who says, hey, I got a complaint, I said, that's what your principal's for. Let's do that at a different time. I'm here to have a good time, to enjoy myself, to see what your kids are doing and how good they are. And you might have to say that 100 times, but.
Gee, you made a really good point about the importance of attending events or activities where there may be parents or community members at, because not only are you there supporting staff, but you're there.
Parents.
You're being visible to the community, which I really liked. And
If somebody says, hey, I didn't like what happened in my classroom, I don't like this, I said, well, we got ways to take care of that. You'll have to deal with that at Bliss or at the principal's office. I'm here to have a good time, and you are too. And as part of it is, I think a lot of these things that you want to put restrictions on will happen because you made a personal connection. And personal connections, I think, go a long ways to raising that 1 percentile. And that's where we really have a problem with. And since COVID happened, we were not allowed to go into schools.
Right.
And it's become like, nobody knows
Might I
who
think
you
Jen
are.
wanted to say
Well, I was just saying, I'm hearing a lot of the danger and the fear, and I appreciate that. I really think we need to look at the opportunities, and please note that it does say pilot for this school year. So if we do decide to move forward with this, like, we can come back, if this is approved, we would come back with the clear parameters. We can share with the board. And I'll just throw another option out there. I mean, perhaps we say this is optional, because if you don't feel comfortable, I don't think we should force anybody. I don't know.
I think you can anyway, but.
One thing
No,
to consider also is we've got 14 buildings and 9 board members. So if this
Right,
were
we
to go
would-
forward, we'd need to know people that would be interested in multiple buildings.
There's 9 elementary schools. You cover those, you'll cover everybody in the district.
Correct.
Well, we've got 2 junior highs, we
Right,
have Spash.
so we talked about somebody would have, like, if,
Everybody comes through the elementary schools.
But I think that.
But they may not have kids in elementary currently.
correct.
No, but they will eventually.
No, we had talked about some board members having 2, if they would like.
Well, I don't think anybody should do anything they don't want to do.
I would agree with you.
But, because then you won't do a
For
very good
sure.
job, and you will be that
So-
person that nobody likes.
You know,
I'm gonna push you in that building.
a couple of things, and I do agree with you. That's why I said I think events are a great place to start for the whole. Let the board know you have. Make it something that's a priority, so that people can see us. I've been in every building for many different things. We even tried to have board meetings in schools, and the technology was just kind of a nightmare. So I totally agree with that. I think it's a goal we should have for ourselves, that we need to visit when we're able to. I'm trying to understand, and Dennis, I know you've been in this district, you know a lot of people. So can you tell me, you want to visit a school, a specific school? I'm not going to agree to the adopting. If you want to go to a school, can you tell me what would you do? You know, what would your reason be? Would you call a principal and say, hi, I want to come and see what you're doing in your school? What kind of,
I'll give you an example.
what's the purpose?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Let's say that we're doing a math adoption. And we know that it's the authority of the board to approve those curriculums and those adoptions. So let's say it's a pilot program, because generally speaking, in a math adoption or a reading or language arts, whatever, we might have a pilot going on. So if we're going to make informed decisions, we may want to visit that school and see that program. So when we come back and there's discussion about it, we can say, yeah, we've seen this. It may be just something like this spring, new board member, lots of new building going on. I haven't seen those buildings, what they're doing
Right.
and what those facilities are. I wanted to have a tour and did a tour with the principal and tour just the building and see what
Right.
those new facilities are that our taxpayers are paying for. I think the only, and again, I don't think this is going to be break or make the district in one way or the other, but I think the intent here is to specifically say, because right now, it's just like when I was a principal, I talked to teachers about, let's have good parent contact. Let's always, let's send out letter. Oh, yeah, we're going to do that. No one did it to the extent that it was a powerful thing, but not enough teachers had that kind of ongoing communication that I thought was enough. And the same with the board. We all think that's really important to do it, but in reality, what I hear Jen saying, I haven't been in these schools for a long time, but just saying it really isn't that much of a presence by
Right.
district leadership or board leadership. So I think maybe the maybe we come together on is to say, those people are interested, let's take a school this year, let's just take, whoever involved will take it, like 1 or 2 schools and give it a shot. At the end of the year, it may be that, you know what, we really didn't see much difference at all, or we might have those schools come forward and say, hey, you know what, that was really cool that those board members came in and adopted,
Right.
and they made more,
Right.
we saw more board members than we've seen in the past, and we had a good sense, just like you're saying. The majority of teachers I worked with, they wanted their decision makers in the building, not because, it's one time of the year we had an issue with a staff member and now we're going to go to that building. No, people that take a general interest. And I agree, and I think you have to, with Jeff and with Meg, it could be a disaster if we let it be a disaster, and if we don't engage in it in a way that is professional and appropriate, it could be a disaster, then the pilot wouldn't work. I don't want to dismiss it out of hand to say that, because you're not comfortable, that we shouldn't,
We
or
don't
you're
get
not
together,
comfortable.
right? And we would contract with the
right.
principal. So I think you need a contract with the
Right.
principal, right?
So, and your primary is that visibility that we're in the schools. is what I-
Visibility, increasing morale with the educators, and the teachers, and the staff that are in the buildings, because it's not happening right now. It's just not. So an intentional focus, and we talk about equity, equal representation amongst all these schools.
So I'm gonna step back, because I think it's important for us to look to the superintendent with respect to improvement of morale, and for her to bring forward information and guidance. She, again, is the director of the district, and oftentimes I hear that there is, morale's not good. These general sweeping
We
statements.
have the data.
I believe, Jen, if you take a look back through surveys, year after year, the numbers related to our buildings are positive. The numbers related, whether it be parents or whether it be staff, and it has been consistent for forever. And to me, it makes some logical sense that staff is comfortable with their coworkers, staff is comfortable with their principals, staff is comfortable within their buildings. They have some general issues and concerns that that the superintendent and cabinet then look to improve. It's the same with respect to parents. The next step removed, superintendent, there's a consistent drop-off of numbers because parents and community members have less interaction with the superintendent, and oftentimes it may or may not be a positive situation. It's the same situation with respect again, and this is my opinion with respect to the board. To me, it is so important that what we are seeing in our district is those really good, strong numbers coming from parents, coming from staff, coming from community with respect to what is happening in our schools. Because for most people in this community, that is the contact. That is where they're looking to receive the substance. And the reality is, as school board members, we are that several steps removed and have a relatively defined responsibility with respect to our district. And it's, I mean, I'm not saying I like those numbers any better than you like those numbers, but I also recognize that I'm not and I shouldn't be responsible for the day-to-day coordination and work with our staff. That is up to the superintendent, administration, principals, teachers, our bus drivers, those are their jobs. Right. And we as board members need to continue to, I really believe, understand what our roles are. And they are to attend board meetings and make the best decisions we collectively can in support of administration to be able to effectively and efficiently operate our schools day to day.
And we were saying presence in the schools would enhance that and would give us a more of a lens as we're making these decisions that impacts the people that are in those buildings. And so I don't disagree with anything you say regarding, I think a lot of the teachers are very happy in their buildings. We're not, the measure that we created has nothing to do with that. It has to do with how they feel about us as the board. And I don't, were you gonna?
Jeff had something actually first.
I was just gonna ask, how would you know if any school was uncomfortable with this?
I guess the same way we know whether about the leadership and everything else. I mean, some of it is people would have to say.
I don't think you'd
You know,
have
I
to-
could tell you that. I could tell you this
They
much
would
right now.
really do that to
Yeah,
us?
I could tell you. I could tell you this much. If a school were uncomfortable with me being in the building or with you being in the building, that principal in 25 seconds would be calling Corey and letting them know.
They would?
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think we're
Absolutely.
gonna get,
Yeah.
Just 1 second, because we asked the committee, this is a board, the board set an agenda, a goal of community engagement. We asked the committee to come up with ideas for doing that. It's not a superintendent goal.
Right.
And with all due respect of the superintendent, this is something to say, and you know, I agree with 92% of what you say now, it used to be 94. But in all due respect, we do help set the tone.
yes.
We are leaders in this district in the sense that we do have some authority to make decisions. And people do look up to us, and we are part of the process. We are not supposed to be, and nor ever should, no, doing the day-to-day things and those decisions. All those things are off our plate. But the visibility, the interaction, the relationship and engagement with the overall district, yeah, I think that's in on our plate.
I think Barb wants to say something.
Speak up then.
Oh,
No,
no?
she said no.
Okay, okay.
Go
I thought I
ahead.
saw
Corey-
you.
Corey wanted to say something.
Just a thought, might the board consider setting, a number? It's recommended that each board member visit each building in our district at least one time in the next year.
I think you gotta be there for a reason. You can't just
There
be
you go. That's-
visiting and walking around.
Events.
You have to have a
But I'll-
purpose.
But
You have to have a
I
purpose.
disagree with Dennis on one thing, is I don't want to be in a classroom. I don't want to judge whether this program is working or not that we adopted, because that's not my job, it's your job. You know, I don't want to be evaluating anything. I want to be there just to be
That's fine, yeah.
a good person. How you doing? Things are great.
Right.
Loving school, pat people on the back. You're doing a great job teaching first grade. And they might not even, I'll guarantee you, somebody's going to go away saying, well, I
great.
didn't know that guy. He seems all right. Or she seems pretty
Well,
good, you know?
I don't think we have to
having a
kind of come up with a complete agreement about what we're doing there, because right now, we're apparently not doing a whole lot, so any little bit that we do would be a lot further. But I think honestly, it is your job to make approval of curriculum. So you do have to know what's going on, and I would hope if there's a pilot that obviously you'll be informing us of
But I
of what's
wouldn't
happening
go
there.
into a school saying, I'm going to judge
No, either would I.
this is working
No,
or
no,
not.
I'm not, I would not go in the same.
I don't want to
judgment
be
value
there in any official
I
capacity.
think if you're there,
except to
period,
nice
that'd be a
to
good step
people.
forward. I'm not talking about you as an
Yeah.
individual.
I think there should be, I think that visibility is really important, but I
Yes.
think you should have a purpose. And I do think the principal, I made a
Oh, ahead of
donation
time.
to one of the schools this year. The kids were doing a fundraiser, and I called the principal and I said, I'd like to make a donation. I'd like to drop off a check. Went in, she said, would you please, talk to the students, would you mind just, letting them know? And I said, absolutely not. The kids were excited, I'm a board member, I'm so proud of what you did. I was in there for 5 minutes and met with the 2 classes that were doing that for 5 minutes. There was a purpose for me being there. And the that's what we want. We want that connection.
We need
of
to replicate that, and that's
Right,
what I think
right.
that's what we're
But
trying to.
I had a purpose. I didn't just go in and
And we're
say
not
hi.
saying, that's
Can't
not,
do
we
that.
never, that was never right,
But
right.
I'm saying, I wouldn't agree with the adopt, because if you say, yeah, anyone who wants to, does that mean that the other people don't want to?
Well, clearly, I think that does mean that. I mean,
But
actually, it does.
But I mean, is that fair to the board members who say, I'm not comfortable with that, I'd like to be visible in the schools, I'd like to have a
That's why it
purpose
could be
to
a
go in?
pilot. I guess we could do it one of two ways. One is that we could follow the recommendation of the superintendent to say, hey, we're all going to pledge to make a goal to be, that's just, it's a recommendation. Or we can just say, we can throw it away completely, or we could kind of meet halfway and say how many people are interested in doing it. Let's give it a shot, and if it all goes to, whatever, then we won't do it. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of
you all
harm.
want the same thing.
Right.
I feel
Can I
like,
make one point that hasn't been made yet? I know there are a number of points that have been made several times, but what I serve on a number of boards. I work with a lot of startup companies. We, as board members, have a very unique perspective. And that perspective is a 40,000-foot view of what's going on, high level. We don't get into the minutia. Again, we have professionals to deal with that. When you get into that at that ground level, when you get involved with that at that level, you begin to lose that perspective.
Thanks,
That's
that's
all I
good
wanna
input.
say.
Cory, did you have something?
So I think, I mean, again, I think we've discussed this a lot. I think we can move on to goal 3 and then come back to just do a vote for 1, 2, and 3
I
separately.
mentioned this at our meeting. If people don't want to do it, I'd just do it myself.
Right. This would be optional in a pilot, but this would, again, the reason that we said 1 for each school is an intentional focus and cadence for each school. But we can move to goal 3. Unless there's any more commentary on.
I just think we should just resolve this one way or the other. We resolved the 1A, B, C. Let's just talk about this and decide, either vote on it or come up with a compromise or adopt what
Can you table it
Cory
till
has
next?
indicated.
next-
I don't think
Table it till the next?
No, I think we don't table it because I don't know how much.
I think you need to flesh it out a little more. I think it needs to be more clearly defined, because you were saying, again, this thing could get completely out of hand if it's not clearly.
Maybe if we develop the parameters, people
That's
would
what
But I think we
would
just
feel
need, I think we
comfortable.
need to vote on whether we're doing this or not, and voting with, if we do approve, to come back with the parameters that need to be approved.
It
because it's-
depends. Again, devil's in the details.
I believe each of us are individuals, all right? We all run for election. We all got elected. We all have our own beliefs about how we want to interface with the various constituencies that we as board members should be interfacing with. I am personally uncomfortable with requiring
So,
any board member or to create an expectation with respect to any board member about how we are interfacing as board members with our school communities, with our broader community, with our nonprofit. To me, it's very uncomfortable. I mean, and again, I'm not saying, I'll point out the president position in that there's a lot of time and effort. There's a lot of effort that I put in with respect to this, the board, and with respect to the district, as with each of you. And I believe it's very important that we, again, allow each of us as individual board members to act as we choose, to represent ourselves as board members. So I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of creating official jobs for any of us as board members in our district. And I believe that's what we're doing right now.
Barb wants to say something.
Barb?
You, at the last meeting, you gave us that charge to come up with these 3 goals. And I would say to any of you that are negative about this, what's your suggestion?
Yeah, community engagement was a goal, so, I mean,
I'll have to get back to you on that.
well, I
I think visibility. I think having a purpose in schools make us more visible. How would you, when you look at the events that are going on? Dennis, you mentioned the school, all the improvements, okay? I hadn't seen what was going on at Spash. I called and said, I'd like to, can I just take a look at what you're doing, what's going on, or the end result? We did have an end result. That gave me a purpose and a desire to connect with that school, find that out. That's a purpose thing. I'm not really sure what a purpose of adopting a school, if I want to call a school principal and say, I haven't seen the lunch menu, I haven't eaten lunch in a school, and we have a new menu for the kids. Would it be okay? Would you be comfortable with me? That's a purpose thing.
And I appreciate what Meg's saying too about she's not comfortable with it. I would not want anybody to be
Right.
forced to do this. On the other hand, I don't think there's great danger in having those who are interested say, hey, I'm going to give particular attention to this building, and I'm going to build that relationship. I don't think there's going to be a lot of downside to it. If, as Jeff kind of indicated earlier, that the parameters are clearly defined, and I would personally not have an issue with saying, let's define the parameters before we bring it up for a full discussion. I have a feeling tonight it'd be 4-4 anyway. So,
Well, yeah, I wouldn't want to spend time drafting parameters if this was getting voted down, period. So I think that's what I meant in terms of sequencing is, are we going forward with this? If we are, we can
perhaps
come
we
back.
could vote to whether or not to
Correct.
to ask the committee to bring back parameters.
Yes, I agree.
And I guess
In which case, it still could be voted down.
Oh, yeah,
when it
sure,
comes
sure.
back, because again,
Sure.
the devil's in the details. I don't know what I'm voting on, other than
Right.
to just continue to work on it. And I would support working on it to see what you can do.
Would the committee members feel comfortable not voting on this particular item at this point in time, but going back and having the parameters developed a little clearer, and then bring it back to a yea or nay? And
Well, it's not gonna get voted on tonight, that's for
Well, and I guess I would just
it
ask, I
could
mean,
be. We could easily, all you have to
yeah.
do is say, I want to vote on it.
I don't think people are ready.
Well, and
Okay.
I think
Well-
G noted that he was going to be sitting down with Corey next week.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
so maybe there's some ability for G and Corey as a member of the subcommittee to sit down and further kind of discuss this.
well, and I'd like to be a part of that discussion.
think
I think
the
Barb
committee
would
should
too.
be-
I think
now
it's the
right.
whole committee that should
Committee
be
should
in that
meet.
So
meeting.
maybe.
Absolutely.
And maybe bring it back, and if maybe Corey says, hey, let's give this a shot, let's develop some parameters I'm comfortable with as the leader of the district. Or maybe she comes up with a super idea that melds all her interests into one and brings it back, but I don't want to drop this because
No.
community engagement that's really important. We all said it was important, and Barb's point, if we're not gonna do that, what are we gonna do?
Right.
So let's hammer it out a little bit further and see if we can make it something that more, because I don't want anyone, I certainly don't want you to feel like you're assigned to do something that you have no desire to do, philosophically opposed to.
I want to do what I've been doing, which is I want to go
Right.
to I want to go to all of the schools
And I don't
for
think
the
you should have to
events
change
and the
that.
activities
Right.
that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I don't think we're
But
recommending
if we-
that anyone
yeah,
changes what they're
If we
currently
don't
doing.
introduce something, then say you call a principal, say, I'd like to come over this year and be part of your community. I'd like to come to your events, and send me a list and I will be coming to those events. And they say, well, why are you calling me?
Right.
Right.
What's this about?
And just one quick
Why are you
thing.
coming to my school?
The committee was tasked to bring this forward. Any kind of discussion that says, I don't agree with it, I am so appreciative that they looked at everything and said, we think this would be a good idea. There's no criticism, in that. And I love that, you looked at, what are we looking at? You looked at the survey, you came back and you said, what can we do? So
Good point.
I just want to thank them we're not done, but really appreciate them
Yeah.
doing that.
So
Because you've got
my-
9 people who are saying, well, what about this, what about this?
Well, that's good
And picking it
discussion.
apart. I know, but I'm just.
Good discussion.
I'm
but
just saying
My
thank
view
you.
of it is just totally, you have to be Mr. or Mrs. Positive.
Right,
I agree.
Nothing negative.
right.
If I see something, I'm looking the other way. Principal will take care of it in their own time. I'm here to pat people on the back.
Right.
To say, hey, Junior, how you doing? Having a good time at school? Okay,
Okay.
that kind of
All
stuff.
right.
I have invited Jen and Barb to that meeting on the 16th.
Okay.
So
We're expecting
not
great things
gonna
out of
be
this
in
meeting.
town. Oh, no, I'll be here.
All right.
All right, so goal 3 is communication. Again, let me just take a step back. We were tasked with creating the goals. We took it a step further with creating what outcomes we were looking to achieve and assigning it to a metric in the school perception survey. So this is an idea I'll give contextual, like, I'll just give some context. I have heard from community members, parents, that they feel like they don't have a voice on non-agenda items. And I know we've discussed this in the past. And so there are neighboring districts that have listening forums where it's not a quorum, but we are saying to pilot 1 to 2 listening forums where community members, anyone who would like, could come just share what's on top of mind for them. And so the outcomes we're looking to achieve are enhanced opportunities for, again, those community members and citizens to share what they feel like that's just top of mind, that's not an agenda item. And I can tell you that the perception is that we do, and this, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's the optics, the perception is that we, as a board, do control the dialogue because we determine what's on the agenda. And yes, I agree that citizens can email us, they can interact with us one-on-one, but I also know as a communication professional that sometimes people just want to share in a broad setting with many board members versus one. That is the human element, and I feel like we should pilot. And we said 1 to 2 because, again, we do agree that if we decide to move forward with this, we need to have very clear parameters and expectations that are set. I heard, and G was one of them, that shared some concerns based on what has happened in the past. Again, I also feel like we can't let what has happened in the past hold us back in terms of like how we can move forward and build more of a bridge with the community. So, and I don't know, Barb, if you wanted to add anything, or G?
No.
So I just want to note from, again, in terms of this, I just want to set out the legal reality with respect to open meetings law on this matter. Because when I took a look at it, and I noted it was a subset of the board, no quorum. In my understanding of open meetings law is that any body that our board creates, any initiative that our board officially creates, is subject to open meetings law. In fact, there was a recent case in Appleton where the board created a committee that was a curriculum review committee. It had no board members on it. But because it was created by the board, it was subject to open meetings law. So as we talk through this forum idea, I just want all board members, and Corey and I did reach out to Shayna Lewis, our attorney today, just because I wasn't sure that I was correct, and I wanted to make sure that the board was correct. So if we as a board choose to create listening sessions, they will be subject to open meetings law. We will need to create an agenda. The agenda can be talk about whatever you want. In that event, those board members who are present, have no ability to respond, to clarify, to reply. And citizens can bring us anything from their dog's name to a school matter.
More credit,
I'm sorry, to a community matter. I'm just saying it provides an open forum to the community on not only school matters, but other matters. We also, so that's, if the superintendent would determine that it was beneficial to her administration to hold listening forums, they would not be subject to open meetings law unless a quorum of the board potentially was at the
quorum of the
meeting.
board.
And then you wind up in a situation where you're, it could be alleged that there's an open meetings violation. An individual board member could choose to hold listening forums. That happened in the past, and they would have the ability to appear at a listening session. Anyone could show up. Again, if a quorum of the board happened to be present at that listening session, that again, we could potentially, there could be a claim of an open meetings violation. So I just wanted people to understand that those would be the requirements that we would be operating under from a legal perspective if we are looking to move forward in this manner.
Would that be a concern for the committee that, I mean, as you?
No, we would, right, ensure that we're doing everything within the legal parameters. I think that's something that we discussed. And this is, I do believe, done in the Rothschild School District, and there's another neighboring one.
What's the intent of having a non-quorum meeting? I mean, when you put that in there specifically.
Well, the reason I did that is because, and thank you, that's a good question, is because there has been, I think, I have heard that there are concerns about putting, allowing the community members to speak on non-agenda items. And so, because this is the business of the board, is what I've been told. So this was an alternative that we wanted to offer. So again, if I'm curious to hear what the thoughts are from the rest of the board, but if the board is not in favor of 1 to 2 listening forums within the legal parameters, if the board is not in favor with allowing, to opening up the, kind of opportunities for the community to speak on non-agenda items in kind of a public forum, then what are you in favor for as it relates to the communication goal?
Well, I'm not in favor of the public comment on any issue at the board meetings, because this is where we do the
Right.
business of the board. I am not opposed to having 1 or 2 legally defined informational sessions. I know that it was a disaster in the past. I'm not one that has let a failure define, decisions moving forward. I think it could be done in such a way that it could be positive. And that really relies on whoever is taking this upon their shoulders to do, and the response that the community has. If the community is yearning for input, I think there are many of them are, then they have the responsibility to come and dress themselves in a way that it's productive and positive. If it's not a productive and positive experience, I wouldn't want to be part of that, nor would anybody at this table. But again, I firmly believe that at our meetings, that this is the business of the board. And I want to give credit to Meg, because Meg has often said, well, they have other means of doing it. And I can tell you that I've been very impressed with anybody who has a question response. I've seen Meg through emails, et cetera. She's very open to discussing things. And what you're saying, Jen, is that there are some people that want to have more of an open community discussion. I have no issue with that either.
And I think that you would probably be less constrained if it was not board sanctioned. I think that, because of the open meetings law, that's going to be a lot more restrictive on exactly how you can conduct those.
So you're suggesting having a community listening session, just informally, a board member or 2 doing that, like kind of
Isn't that what
rogue.
Alex did in the past?
That
Yeah.
it may have been more rogue than what I'm comfortable with.
Me too.
Because that's
Or-
one of the reasons
I don't
maybe it
know.
wasn't so successful.
How district feels about it,
Yeah. What are your
But
thoughts?
I think that if the board steps out on that, I think it's gonna end up tying your hands as far as the freedom that you have to discuss certain things, because you're gonna be tied to.
Right, and I think when we had discussed, and I don't know where Barb went, but like the goal wasn't two-way conversation. It was for them to just share. We are not commenting, we are not resolving, we are not debating.
Who would be running the meeting?
Well,
I mean, did you have any?
Well, I would think it would be a board
It's
member.
gonna be a board member,
A board
obviously.
member that would set the precedent at the beginning. These are the parameters, these are the expectations, et cetera.
So for me, and it was, again, in the past, when the topic of forums came up, my first question is always, what's the purpose? And so what I'm hearing from you, Jen, is that you would like the community to have an avenue to provide comment. My earlier comment wasn't meant to be flip at all. For me, is there a purpose for the district in terms of holding a listening forum? Is there input that we as a district believe would be helpful in terms of better running our district? To me, Dennis, as you say, the most productive listening forums are where there's a purpose to them, where there is an agenda, where there is a topic that you're looking for input on, and people have that directed ability to provide input. Now, to me, that makes more sense from an administrative level, the listening forums that Craig and Corey did with our school community this year at each of the buildings, to sit down and just provide a present and then ask people for input. But again, I'll be honest, I am concerned in light of what's happening in this community with some of our other governmental bodies as well as within this state of
I witnessed it
the
firsthand.
motivations for a number of things. And so, but I do think ultimately, if this board chooses to do this, it's going to be subject to open meetings law, and we're going to be in a situation where we're not going to be able to disclaim inaccuracies, and there's going to be the need to, I believe, really control the dialogue.
Well, worthy of noting, Dennis and I attended the WASB orientation, and we asked the legal representative that was there, how many of all of the school districts in Wisconsin, how many allow the public to comment on non-agenda items? And he said a majority. And so we don't allow that, right? We feel like some of us are hearing that people would like to share in a public forum if it doesn't happen to be an agenda item. I guess my question would be, if not this, then what?
Well, maybe one, Corey, I thought the listening sessions that you did with all the different stakeholders were very effective with you, and Craig went around. And if you were comfortable with having one or two with the community, that may be another means of I think the community, there are members of our community who really do want the ability to speak on whatever they want, because there are issues that they have, we don't know about them, and they're reasonable issues, but they're not on the agendas, and yet they have every right. And we have said in our mission statement that one of the things is we want to have an engaged public, and you do an excellent job of, as I said before, of answering questions, but not everybody goes to you either. So if it's not the board, perhaps it could be our superintendent having these listening sessions. I'm more than willing myself to be part of a group to listen to the public. And if it turned into disaster, then no, I wouldn't be interested in doing that forward. And certainly, I think the people who come there have to realize that there's certain expectations. They can't come and say, I hate Dennis Robbie, he's the worst principal in the world. You can't, you can say the person at McGill School, but you can't say those things. And
That's exactly what happened at the.
I know it, but then I think that what Jeff indicated already, that was a rogue experience. It wasn't.
No, all the board members were there.
All of you were there.
Yeah.
We all participated up front.
Ben Franklin.
Oh, that, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it was.
Anyway,
It
that's
would be
my
hard.
2 cents.
Very hard.
Would it be possible, first of all, to define the general topics that you can talk about, if it's school-related, first of all, and then have them submit their issues in advance, and you can look at them and say, yeah, this is pertinent, or this is not pertinent. I don't know how else you can, then you could have an agenda with very specific topics on it, which
Which might defeat the purpose
Yeah, and I
of
don't
what you're
think we
trying
want to
to
be in the
accomplish.
business of saying
Yeah.
no, yes, no.
But you have to do some,
But you can't
otherwise
take
you're
any
gonna end
action.
up with the mess you had before.
We're not taking action in this.
we're not taking any action, and who's to say? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, Jeff, so.
I
Anyway.
guess, again, so we, the subcommittee, spent many hours working on these 3 goals that were given to us by the board. I don't see a lot of movement. So, since we're heading, it's almost 10, what do we want to do? And where do we go from here?
I would suggest putting it back to committee with the information that we know now, that maybe we would have refine them or change them, modify them some way or other, and try again.
I wouldn't say there's no move, because on the first one, I think 2 of the 3 we approved. On the second one, we've asked them to come back and give parameters so we can vote on it. So I think that's positive. And this particular one, what I hear Jeff saying is there's just kind of maybe some idea as to the forum, what does it look like a little bit? And then put it to a vote.
You know, my opinion on these, in concept, you know, I don't have a problem. I understand there's the devil's in the details, but I gotta admit, and I appreciate the work the committee's done, but I'd really like to hear from Corey and Chris, you know, I mean, you guys obviously in your history have, you know what is successful with listing forums, you know what did work, what didn't work. As far as adopting a school, I think you guys have all the answers. You know what will work, what won't
Listen to
work.
this one.
I mean, you're gonna know a lot more than I do.
Sure, sure.
And so I'm probably mostly interested in your opinion of how we can make these things workable.
So first of all, it's a little awkward for me to be setting the board's goals, or, you know, so I've been kind of quiet because I think it's important for you to work through some of that. Goal number 1, to enhance committee structures. You know, we revamped that. I think we're all comfortable with that. Standing agenda items, I think I shared. I'm worried about that, and I really want to give that a try with you coming to me, so I think we're good there. Communication, Sarah and I are already working on that. We're working on ways to enhance communication. We're talking about ways that I can be more visible in the community, where I can gather more feedback from community members, like a coffee with Corey, you know, scheduled at different places around the community. I think things like that I am doing are going to address much of what's been discussed in your goals tonight. Community engagement, I would prefer that I continue to send a list of activities for you to consider attending, and the board make it a point or make it a priority to get in buildings for a specific concert or back to school night or parent-teacher conferences or whatever that is. I think a concerted effort on behalf of the board in that way makes me feel better about it. That I do know, there are some staff members and principals that get worried when there's board members in the buildings. I've heard that. Others are fine with it. So again, it's a little bit all over the place. Communication, listening forums for me have worked in the past when there's a specific topic. You know, I've done it in a previous district where it was about, we were proposing an early out at 1 o'clock every Wednesday. So, you know, we came with a proposal and then we open it up and let people provide input. I remember being involved in a safety listening session here in this district. Again, it had a specific topic, it had an agenda. People were able to provide input into that. Generally, we don't get a good turnout at listening sessions. People would prefer to fill out a survey or provide their feedback that way. I like these goals, communication, committee structure, and community engagement. I think they just need a little bit of tweaking. Chris, anything additional?
I mean, I don't know that I would say anything that hasn't already been said in the interest of time. I just think the one piece around, you know, and I certainly can connect with Corey prior to your meeting with the rest of the committee on the 16th, just there was, I would say, a hybrid version of what we're all suggesting around the adopting a school with board members from my 12 years in Wausau, and I can certainly share that with you. And it sort of aligns with your idea of, we had a board communication that went out, it was called In the Know, bi-weekly, and it included a list of school events that board members could attend. In addition to that, the superintendent and directors developed an informal list of, it was called a board liaison, that was assigned to up to 2 or 3 schools. Now, some of those board members had full-time jobs. They never attended a single event at my building. I also knew that if I had a special event, like we were a school of recognition multiple times while I was a principal. We were like a Title I school recognized for high levels of reading and math achievement. We would have an assembly and I would call my board liaisons or send them an email and say, if you're available, show up. So I would say that's maybe a middle ground of what we've been talking about and maybe where we're trying to get to. So that affords opportunity, I think, for us to discuss further.
I like your idea, and I'm sure you guys will discuss that further on the 16th. The third idea in terms of the specific listening session, I don't think it addresses what your concern was and others people's concerns was regarding people having the ability to bring up issues of their choice. So I think we want to flesh that one out a little bit further.
Yep.
I think you're right, and I think most of us agree that a specific learning, if we were going to have a referendum or something like that, a listening session would be, a pointed one would be very valuable, and nobody will show up for those. But for people to have general conversations about what they're interested in, we may have a better turnout. Maybe disastrously so, but we might have a better turnout.
I think another important piece is we're going to have to communicate with people, letting them know that there won't be any interaction. I mean, I don't want them to come there thinking
Right.
one thing is going to happen, when in fact, if it's under open meetings law, it can't.
Right.
So I think we've got to be clear about that.
Yep.
So I think we'll just, G, you and I and Barb will go back to the drawing board and refine and then bring it back for
For a vote.
And I'm happy to be any part of that, John.
And by the way, I didn't get to say thank you for the work, really. And I
Yeah.
meant to do that before my comments. G and Jen
Well, it's good
and
stuff.
Barb, I think, is gone.
Barb is done with that.
She checked
We
out.
fell asleep. It is always much
Well, we do
easier to
have a
react
closed
to
session
something than it is to create
Create,
something.
absolutely.
And I
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
the
you.
creative, the
It
effort,
is,
the
it's a
creative.
responsibility.
Doing well.
All right, so we're
None of
moving
it.
into future meeting dates and times, and we'll have our regular school board meeting on September 12th, 2022. We now need to go into closed session. I'm looking for a motion to convene into closed session under 1985 paren 1 paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically consideration of Washington Elementary Principal Employment Recommendation and Contract. Second, consideration of Behavioral Support Specialist Employment Recommendation and Contract. Do I have a motion to
Move
go into closed?
Second.
Okay, motion by Jeff, second by Chris. I will have Carlyn call the roll.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson is signed out. Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yep.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
and motion carries.
All right, so 5 minutes,
Yes.
10 minutes, as soon as possible?
5.
4 minutes.